After learning that her husband had a mistress, the wife did not make a fuss, but did something different. They'd been estranged for a long time. Not anymore. Bridget went to live with her boyfriend, and they were left alone in a huge house, where each could get lost and not see the other. They didn't talk to each other for days at a time, not because they were fighting, but because they were strangers. But for 22 years of life together, they never became close. On the contrary, with each passing year, they grew farther and farther apart. Of course, they could have broken up a long time ago, but something kept them apart, especially in the mornings. Ajay couldn't see Olivia sleeping. It was a good thing it was dark at night, and he couldn't see her in her sleep with her mouth open, breathing loudly, sometimes even snoring. How ugly is she when she sleeps? Ugly to the point of nausea. But when she woke up first, she was not one iota more beautiful. EJ knew in advance that when he showered, he would go into the kitchen and see her sloppy, in a hastily thrown-on robe, her hair disheveled, bunched up and tied with a rubber band, her cigarette in her hands, and a mug of coffee. Not a cup, but a mug. Can we not smoke in the kitchen? Ajay will ask again. Or he won't say anything at all, and won't even look in her direction. Where should I smoke? Olivia asks. And he won't answer her question. He just doesn't want a morning argument that will wear out his nerves and ruin his mood. Ajay had a quick breakfast and left for work. He had to be there by 8, Olivia by 9. It used to be that when Bridget lived with them, her daughter or Ajay would make breakfast. The two of them would eat breakfast together, and there would be a semblance of family. Now even that was gone. The dead house had finally died with Bridget gone. At night, Olivia made attempts to get closer to Ajay, at least physically. And there, lo and behold, she'd crawl under her husband's blanket, put her arms around him, kiss his shoulder, and try to grope his flesh. Don Ajay brushes her hand away. Everything is calm in Baghdad. Olivia laughs angrily. You impotent wretch. You think I don't know you only get it up for your mistresses? I hate you. Let's get a divorce, Ajay once again suggests. No way. No way. You'll thank me that I didn't want to divorce you, divide the house, divide the property. And this is when we have everything. Live and be happy. Somehow there's no joy. There's nothing to be happy about, Olivia. And you need to finally realize that. I've been ready for a divorce for a long time. I don't want to fight, Ajay interrupts. I want things to be peaceful so that Bridget can. Shut up. We're going to have grandchildren any day now. And what? You and me? They'll come separately to the cramped apartments we can afford after we divide the property. I wanted to live a selfish life for myself. You were and you still are. You know, the time will come when you won't be able to stop me. Divorce is imminent. It hasn't come yet. What's keeping you? Bridget. I am. I want an amicable divorce. Bridget and Virginia, Ajay thought and smiled. If Virginia agreed, he would have divorced Olivia long ago. It was a good thing Olivia hadn't seen him smile, or there would have been a scandal. She hated it when he smiled, thinking he was thinking about his mistress. And she wasn't wrong. Not about a mistress, but about the one and only one he loved. And he didn't need any others. Virginia, hello, my love. I miss you as much as Danielle. Vacation. Freedom. Daniel's doing great. Only 1 B in English. He's going to Grandma's after tomorrow. So you're free, and I'm free. Olivia left for her mother's yesterday. Will you come over? Can you make it? Ajay wrote. Well, I don't know, Virginia smiled to herself. You know what would agree? How many years have they been dating? And she always goes to Ajay's place like it's a first date. It's about time they got used to each other for so many years. It's even time to get used to each other. But no, it's not working out for either Virginia or Ajay. Virginia, I miss you. Come to my place, come on, I'll be waiting for you, said Ajay. You don't have to meet me, it will attract attention. I'm tired of hiding and I don't want that. I'll meet you at 6:30 outside your office. And that's it, he insisted. Come on, you're driving me away. If I wait for you, I'll pass you by, Virginia objected. I'm not kidding, Ajay. I'll walk by like I don't know you. Let's keep it simple. I have to go home after work. Don't forget, besides Daniel, I have a cat named Thomas. And he's waiting for me. I'll take a cab myself. Am I doing your bidding again? AJ laughed. Well, I guess that's the fate of some men, to wait for their sweethearts. Virginia, life is so short, and we're all waiting for something, he sighed. What are you starting, Ajay? Everything has been said and decided long ago. Everything will be as it is, Virginia said. I love you. I love you. And I'll never stop telling you that, Virginia, he said. Usually men say it before, Virginia joked. You say it after. You're not the right kind of lover. I've always said it, and I'll keep saying it until you get tired of it, Ajay smiled. Don't expect I won't, Virginia smiled back. He saw her smile even in the dark and kissed the corner of her lips. I'm glad I'll wake up with you in the morning. You don't realize how beautiful you are when you sleep. I've been looking at you and looking at you and looking at you. They say when you not only want to fall asleep but also wake up with that person, that's true love. Virginia, you're the one I want to wake up with every morning, Ajay said. You're at it again, Ajay, over and over again. Why doesn't Virginia tell Daniel you're his father? You tell him stories about a father who doesn't exist, and yet you're right there with us, and yet you're far away from us. Who needs that? Virginia, I want to be with you all the time, to take care of you every day. All women dream of that, but you don't. I can see you're worried about a difficult situation, Virginia, and you have serious concerns about how you're going to talk about it and what the repercussions will be for those around you. You know why I can't tell you now, and it's for the best, Virginia said. It's still a deception, no matter how you look at it. You think this deception is your way of keeping my marriage to Olivia alive. It's long gone. You of all people know that. Bridget's an adult with her own life. I don't see how we're going to be able to tell everyone. She asked glumly. Do you have any idea how many people we'd hurt, how many people we'd make unhappy? Olivia, her mother, Bridget, my parents, Daniel. There's no telling who else will be in this line because of the two of us. A lot of people's lives will change. And the fact that I'm sleeping with you, my best friend's husband, and she doesn't know. I'm sure she's complaining to you about how impotent I am, that I have tons of mistresses. Doesn't that change someone's life? Listening to her, you must sympathize. And she doesn't suspect a thing, Virginia continued. I wonder what you told her about Daniel's father? I told her it was a resort affair. And everyone's blind, they can't see that he looks like you. Or they don't want to see. I don't know. They do. They don't, but it's more peaceful. Can you imagine the town turning against my parents when they find out I stole my husband from my best friend who I grew up with since I was a kid? Okay, other people. But Olivia's mother is my parents' neighbor. How are they supposed to live with their houses next to each other? Virginia asked Ajay. How, AJ, can you answer all my questions for me? And how do I explain to Daniel that Uncle Ajay is not only Bridget's dad, but also his dad? What about us, Virginia? Ajay sighed. We don't. Soon you won't need sex, and you'll start to forget about me. What's that got to do with it? Virginia wondered. You see, I'm getting older. I don't want to be with Olivia. I want to be with you. I'm going to be a boring old woman. Virginia tried to turn the conversation into a joke. I'll be nagging you, shuffling my feet. Perhaps I will sing ugly, weak because of my weak voice. Then you'll realize what a mistake you've made, said Virginia. Falling for my charms when you were young. What about Olivia? Does she smoke? Does she drink her coffee? That's the way she's always been. That's the way she'll always be. And if you don't touch her, she won't touch anyone. And I want you to touch me and grumble. And I'd hug you and smile, and you'd stop grumbling, she continued. And tomorrow I'll turn you on your side, and you'd stop singing. And that you'll be ugly, I'll never believe that. You'll always be beautiful to me. All right, AJ, let's make a bet. It's almost morning. Let's do it. I love waking up first and watching you sleep. He kissed her on the temple, and she woke up, reached up and hugged him. Is that what you're doing to me? Ajay smiled and hugged Virginia. I gotta go. Virginia said, trying to get out of his embrace. Olivia is on the first bus to arrive. She told me about it. Do you think she guesses and warned me on purpose? I don't know what she knows or doesn't know. We hardly talk to her, AJ replied. We'll get there in time, he said. AJ put his arms around Virginia and drew her to that height, that flight of feeling, where not only their bodies but their souls join. And right then, just in that moment, he felt that he and Virginia were one, inseparable. And now Virginia cried out and gratefully embraced AJ. But the brightness of the orgasm was beginning to fade from the altitude in which they had taken flight. They were returning to everyday life. And now Virginia cried out and her body tensed. But unlike before, her arms didn't wrap around his neck. They slid off his shoulders. Virginia's body shuddered, and her frightened, fixed eyes stared at AJ with a glazed look. And he suddenly realized that she was not breathing. Virginia, Virginia, shouted AJ, and began to shake her, trying to bring her back to life. He started CPR, but nothing worked. EJ called an ambulance and tried to breathe life into Virginia until it arrived. There's an ambulance outside our gate. Do you know who to see? The first thing Olivia asked when she entered the house. EJ stood at the window and, without turning around at his wife's voice, answered. To our place. Who? Us. Olivia wondered. Over there, he nodded toward the bedroom. Virginia's in there. He turned, and Olivia saw that AJ was crying. He wiped the tears from his face with a quick motion and looked at Olivia in silence. She had never seen EJ cry before, and it struck her as much as Virginia and the EMTs in their bedroom. Without a word, Olivia opened the door with a sharp movement and saw her friend's naked body on the floor and the doctors putting some instruments into their cases. Why is she on the floor? Olivia asked, shocked. Apparently it was easier for the man to perform CPR that way, the doctor answered and added, she's dead. The cause of death will be determined by the medical examiner. We've already called there. They'll come for the body soon. She's dead, Olivia said confusedly as she came out of the bedroom. She slumped into a chair and pulled cigarettes out of her purse with a trembling hand. I know, AJ answered without turning to look at his wife. There was silence. AJ was grateful that she wasn't interrogating him right now. He heard the coffee machine turn on. Apparently a cigarette without coffee was unusual for Olivia. Olivia noisily sipped her coffee and flapped her nose. Crying? AJ wondered. Didn't she understand anything? Olivia was indeed crying. Turning to her, he saw her wiping away her tears and blowing her nose loudly into her handkerchief. What's going to happen now? Without looking at her husband, she asked. I have to meet Daniel tonight. He's there, at Virginia's parents. I have to tell her parents. Can you do that? I can do that. I'll let them know. Thank you. For what? Thank you for not asking me anything. We'll talk about it later. There's nothing to talk about, Olivia said. Olivia took a deep breath and said, if I've been silent all this time, it's not because I'm so stupid that I can't see what's going on. I've seen it all, and I see it all. Is Daniel your son? You don't have to answer that. I already know he's your son. But we'll talk about that later, not now. Thank you, Olivia, AJ said. The car from the morgue arrived. Virginia's naked body was carried past AJ and Olivia. It's over, Olivia said. She's not coming back here. Why did you say that, Olivia? Why? AJ asked. To make you feel better. We're burying Virginia. You look like you've lost it. Her parents are elderly. We'll have to make the funeral arrangements. They'll probably want to bury her in her home village. I hope you realize no one wants all these juicy details for their own peace of mind. No one wants the truth. Not Virginia's mother, not her parents. And neither do Daniel and Bridget. And I thought it was time Daniel knew I was his father, AJ said. Not now. The boy is 11 years old, his mother's dead, and now you're the father. Not now, Olivia objected. How do we explain that Virginia died in our house? Let's say she didn't know I'd gone to my parents' house and came to see me. She got sick, and while the ambulance was on its way. A doctor again, and a doctor when she's gone. Vika, you understand. I loved her. And I love her, AJ said in a shaky voice. It hurt Olivia to hear it. But she wasn't going to make a scandal. She'd always been strong, and now more than ever, she needed to stand firm, not comfort her flailing husband. Stop being hysterical, Olivia said harshly. Don't you think I should be the one throwing tantrums, not you? You've always been a rock, impenetrable, indifferent. There's nothing feminine about you. Why should I love you? You're like a tank. Ajay wanted to say something, but he was stopped by a slap from Olivia. He stopped talking and stared at his wife with tears in his eyes. And then he calmed down. Keys to the apartment, Olivia demanded. Virginia, do you have keys? Olivia asked. Yes, go to the train station to pick up Bridget. Get some things for him at the apartment and come here. Will you be able to tell the baby? Ajay asked. No, I can't. How? How am I going to tell him? Olivia replied. I knew it. I'll have to go with you. Where's Mom? Daniel was surprised to see Uncle Ajay with Aunt Olivia. Come on, Daniel, let's go to the car. I'll explain everything to you, Olivia hugged the child. An unsuspecting Daniel smiled and looked at Uncle EJ. AJ turned away from the boy and cried. Did something happen? Daniel realized. Mommy, where's Mommy? The child asked with concern in his voice, tormenting EJ's soul. You what? Danielle shouted. Are you what? Where's Mommy? Mommy's not here anymore, replied Olivia. What do you mean, gone? You're what? Daniel shouted. People at the train station began to pay attention to them. Mom is dead, replied Olivia and hugged Daniel. The boy pushed Olivia away and ran, but she quickly caught up with him and hugged him tightly, not allowing him to break free. She looked at Ajay reproachfully. Not everyone is as tough as you are, Olivia said to him. Why are you standing there like that? They're waiting in the car. I hope I don't have to run with you. About 10 minutes later, Ajay and Olivia returned. The boy was crying his eyes out. Olivia hugged him, pulled him close and stroked his head the whole way. Pulmonary embolism. Cardiac arrest, instant death. That was the cause of Virginia's death. She was buried, as Olivia had expected, in her home village, where she had been born and where her parents had lived. Daniel stayed with his grandparents for the rest of the summer vacation. They had taken custody of him, and from the end of August, at Olivia's insistence, Daniel would have to live in her and Ajay's house. Why would he want to change from a city school to a country school? There are teachers and kids there that Daniel is used to. As a teenager, it's stressful for a child. Olivia argued. It wasn't enough for him to be stressed by his mother's death. Aunt Mary, Uncle Bill. Well, it's not like he's going to live from strangers. Then again, you're elderly people. Can you handle it? Olivia objected. Why, Olivia, why would you need such a burden? We're his relatives, we're his guardians, said Virginia's father. It is impossible for us to move to a one-room apartment in the city in our old age. Here on Earth we have lived all our lives, and here we will die. We need to think about Daniel now, not about whose blood related to whom, Olivia said. He's not a little boy anymore. Let's ask him what he thinks about it. No, I'm just going to my class. What about it? Daniel replied, confused, realizing that was impossible. Uncle AJ and I want you to live with us, Daniel. Then you can go to your own school and be in your own class. Can we do that? Daniel hesitated. You can and you should. But are we strangers to you? Thank you, Aunt Olivia. Daniel smiled and hugged Olivia. Ajay, what do you say? You're all quiet. Would Daniel be a burden to you? Virginia's mom asked. No, we're great friends of Daniel's, Ajay said. I think Olivia's right. He wanted to announce to everyone that Daniel was his son. How could he be against his son? But he realized Olivia was right. Right now, we have to get past Virginia's death. The news of his paternity would be too hard on everyone. After Virginia's funeral, Ajay took a vacation and drank. He hadn't been addicted to alcohol before, but now it had become his cure for losing his beloved. Maybe it's time to stop drinking. After 2 weeks of drinking, Bridget's wife asked, "We need to fix up Daniel's room. You can drink endlessly and reach the end of the road, but it's not going to bring Virginia back. Do you need to think about your son right now?" Sobbing drunkenly, Ajay, "Daddy, you never understood me. All you ever wanted was money and nothing else. Virginia's gone and I don't want to live." "If you don't want to live, then don't live. But you have to live for others," Bridget replied. "What do you mean, don't live?" Ajay stared at her. He poured vodka into his mug and drank it in one gulp. He wrinkled his nose and asked his wife, "Are you suggesting that I kill myself? But if you don't want to live, you have to fight it, do something, catch up with your beloved." "Bridget, no insults. I understand you're going through an irreparable loss, Virginia's death, but it's wrong to vent your pain by blaming others. You're right, I didn't take responsibility for Daniel for mercenary reasons. I sincerely want him to be surrounded by care and love, to continue to learn in a familiar environment. This is now so important for the boy after the tragedy. I realize that I cannot fully understand your pain of losing the woman you love. Love is the greatest feeling that not everyone gets to experience in life. Virginia was your guiding star, and her passing has broken your heart. But the hatred and hurtful words against me are misplaced. You and I have traveled a long road together. Yes, our marriage wasn't perfect, but our son Daniel grew up in it. This is not the time for recriminations. Let's put aside past resentments and concentrate on the most important thing, our son, who was left without a mother. He needs our support and care. I say we stop fighting and get together to fix up Daniel's room. We'll renovate, create a cozy environment to make him feel at home. We'll discuss all the details. I'll allocate the necessary funds. For Daniel's sake, let's put aside our differences and join forces. It's already hard enough for the boy. Let's not add to his worries. Together we can get through this terrible grief. That's what I suggest." Bridget questioned Olivia's intentions. "Why would you do that? I don't understand your diabolical schemes. How can you talk about anything when you're drunk? If you were sober, I could answer your questions. And when you're sober, I'll tell you about my diabolical schemes. I'll explain why I didn't give you a divorce, why I didn't chase Virginia out of my house like the last creature she was. But then I'm afraid you'll lose heart." Ajay and Virginia were weak people. Two lovebirds met, but love alone is not enough to live. The weak must lean on the strong. To what? So the strong can crush them? I hate this hatred boiling up inside me. Hate is a feeling. Maybe it can sustain you in this drunken frenzy. Olivia turned on the coffee maker and lit a cigarette. She had no problem with Daniel's upbringing. Virginia seemed to have raised him right. He'd done well in school, and his teachers had praised him. At home, to Olivia's surprise, he was accustomed to independence. Like Bridget had once been, he didn't need to be reminded to keep his room in order. He was always neat. Virginia had been a perfectionist too. If she did something, she did it to perfection. But in her personal life, she had gotten Olivia's husband, who was far from perfect. But that's exactly how he seemed to Olivia. Maybe Virginia had a different opinion of him. Love is blind or blind to many things. Olivia's eyes weren't blinded by her love for EJ, and she knew he'd never loved her. He'd adored their daughter Bridget, though, for which Olivia was grateful. And until Bridget went to live with her boyfriend, divorce was out of the question. I wonder why he'd want a divorce now, Olivia thought. I mean, she was sure of herself. No, just because she'd slept with AJ didn't mean she was going to live with him. She loved her parents very much, and as long as they were alive, she wouldn't disturb their peace with a change in her personal life. Olivia realized that Virginia's personal life consisted of more than just seeing AJ. She was aware of that, so she was outwardly calm. She wasn't throwing tantrums or jealousy scenes. She was just keeping the situation under control. Otherwise, if Olivia made her knowledge of their connection public, it would only bring her friend closer to her husband. So she played dumb and kept her balance. Of course, it wasn't easy to smile at her bitch friend and complain to her about her impotent husband, knowing that Virginia was far from impotent. Virginia didn't seem to realize that Olivia knew about her affair with EJ. so she excitedly told her friend about her love affair with Max. "Olivia, you have no idea what he's like. He loves me so much. I can't see anyone else but him. Shall I introduce you?" Olivia laughed to herself, laughing and angry at the same time. "He's married, don't hurt yourself, you fool." "But no, he won't. Can you believe his name is a J too?" "I can't imagine," Olivia replied as she continued to play her part. "Your husband? Yeah, but my AJ isn't as good as yours." "What's wrong with your AJ?" Virginia wondered. "Impotent, weak. If it wasn't for me, he'd still be in his buy more. I got him into the world. Everything he's got is because of me." "Why do you live with him?" Virginia wondered. "You talk about him like you don't love him." "Why should I love him?" "He doesn't love me either. He's got a fool like himself on the side, and they're enjoying each other. Let them enjoy each other. But I won't give him a divorce. I didn't spend so much effort on him to give him away." "Why a fool?" "Maybe she's the other one who's not a fool at all." "You don't say. If she's in love with him, she's a fool. How can you live like this without love?" "I don't understand." "It's easier," Olivia said sharply. Olivia retorted. "But what do you have to gain from your love? See each other once or twice a week? Texting? Is that what love is for? To have each other once in a while? Then it's not love, it's just a deal." "Our life is a bargain," replied Virginia. "Your husband asks you while he's got something working for him, and then you're alone as a wife. Are you alone?" "Why alone?" "I have a son, Daniel." "I have a daughter too, but she has her own adult life. And your Daniel won't be a child forever. There will be grandchildren." Virginia smiled dreamily. "And what will you give your grandchildren? One room?" "I'm not divorcing my asshole so I don't have to share with him. I want to keep everything for Bridget." "But you know, if you live by that standard, what kind of life is that? It's just an ordinary life, no worse than anyone else's." "How do you think other people live?" "Floating in the clouds. Clouds are the element of birds. We humans are earthbound, materialistic creatures. You, Virginia, think about what you're saying and leave your man. Quietly find a normal man who doesn't sing your bedtime dithyrambs but earns money." "I can't do that. I need love." That was the last conversation I had with Virginia. Where did she push her? To an ignominious death in someone else's bed. Once again, Olivia has to cover up her lowlife. All because she's strong, not a sissy. But Ajay, on the other hand, is distraught over the death of his beloved. And Olivia can't help him pull himself together, be strong. She's strong, and here she is, powerless after work. To sleep. As EJ said himself, he takes 2 or 3 shots of vodka, and on weekends he gets drunk to a semi-conscious state. "Stop drinking," Olivia urged her husband. "Daniel sees you in a bad way. Let him see what you've done to his father. You brought this on yourself, and don't open your filthy mouth about being a father. Nobody wants that, especially you." "I'm lost," Olivia, a drunken AJ, sobbed. "My Virginia's gone, and I'm gone with her. You're going to wait for me to ask the tenants out of the apartment, and I'm going to send you there too. I'm sick of looking at your drunken face and cleaning up after your drinking." "Don't clean up. I'll clean up, Olivia. Just don't move me into Virginia's apartment. I'll go crazy in there." "You will. You'll end up in a mental institution. Although you'll probably stop drinking there." "I'm done," Olivia promised a drunken Ajay. "I'm done drinking. You'll see." Promises remain promises, and Olivia continued to watch EJ drink. Bridget's entreaties didn't work on him either. "Dad, maybe it's time to get treatment for alcoholism," Bridget asked. "Treatment for what? What are you, daughter and mother, together? What am I, a drunk, to get treatment?" Ajay was getting drunk, and no one could resist it. He was tolerated at work for a long time. But after a couple of years, when they began to notice that at work he smelled of alcohol, he called his boss, asked him to write a letter of dismissal. "Daniel's son," yelled a drunken AJ. "At least you're not giving up on me, unlike Olivia." "Uncle Ajay keeps saying I'm his son," Daniel said. I guess he thinks because you live with us, he can think of you as his son. He gets drunk and talks nonsense. The truth is, of course, he's not your father and you're not his son. Ignore what he says, Danielle. Olivia didn't understand what money Ajay was drinking on when he was out of work. Apparently, he had some savings that she didn't know about, and that worried her greatly. Spending that kind of money was incredibly stupid. At the moment, their budget wasn't big enough for him to squander that much money. Sometimes she wished he would die so she could finally breathe free and not worry about anything, and she had plenty to worry about. If Daniel was known to be Ajay's son, then he would be his father's heir too, which meant she'd have to share it with him. That's why Olivia had taken Tammy into her home to, as they say, keep her finger on the pulse. Otherwise, you never know. Maybe Ajay would start traveling to the village to see Daniel's parents from the branch, and he'd let it slip that he was Daniel's father. This way, everything's in plain sight, everything's under control. He calls Daniel's son, and she explains to the boy that it's Uncle Ajay's drunken ramblings. And she's got Ajay under her watch, everything under control. Had Ajay known that Bridget wasn't his daughter, but his old friend Mike. But she liked Mike, and he liked her. Maybe that's called love. Olivia doesn't remember anything about it now, but at the time she knew that nothing good was going to happen between her and Mike. Mike was the leader, and she was his equal. Then Olivia decided to marry the docile, quiet EJ who was graduating from college. She was glowing. You could say she'd gotten him into bed, and then presented him with her one-time pregnancy. Does that happen? Ajay wondered at the time. It was obvious he wasn't thrilled with the news, but he'd never given up on his marriage to Olivia. Not once did he doubt that Bridget was his daughter. Olivia saw that he loved Bridget more than Daniel. It was understandable. He saw her day in and day out, interacted with her, and she loved him. Sometimes it seemed to Olivia, or maybe it didn't even seem like it, that Bridget loved her father more than he loved her. It made her both happy and a little sad. But mostly, of course, it made her happy. It was a good thing Virginia was dead. No one would ever find out. AJ's getting drunker by the day, and no one listens to his drunken ramblings anymore. Well, Virginia's gone, so the secrets will remain secrets. When were Olivia and Virginia real? And there was no AJ standing between them. Olivia stupidly told her that Bridget wasn't Ajay's daughter, which she regretted. And when she found out about her husband's affair with her friend, she feared exposure. But Virginia kept quiet. Strangely enough, she didn't. Or maybe she'd just forgotten. Though it's hardly the sort of thing one forgets. But Olivia's secret was gone with her friend, and that was good for her. No, Daniel's presence was a little inconvenient. But it was such a small thing compared to what she would keep. Besides, Daniel provided for her financially the pension, the income from her mother's apartment. Her parents from the village tried to give her some money. And then, when Daniel turns 18, then let him move into his mother's apartment and live independently. By that time, Olivia hoped EJ would have already gone to heaven to his beloved, especially since he was so eager to go to her, so drunk. It's just impossible. That's all. No one to share it with. Everything will be left to her and Bridget. Aunt Olivia, I need to brush up on my English, get a tutor. Is that possible? Or I'm going to get in. A B's ruining the whole picture. I can't do it on my own. I need extra credit. As far as I know, chemistry and biology are important for college, not foreign language. How high do you think they're going? That's where they get in. Do you need the money? I don't think I'm aiming too high. Medicine is my thing. I'll do it on my own, Aunt Olivia, without the money. So you're turning me down? I don't know, of course. Maybe all the money goes to support me. Olivia was silent, wondering how she could refuse Daniel. Excuse me, I'll ask my grandparents, Daniel said, feeling awkward. Is it that there is no money for my son? Ajay intervened in the conversation. He seemed to be sleeping on the couch in the living room, where Olivia was watching TV, and under the influence of the green snake, he seemed to be sound asleep. Turns out he could hear everything. Good for you, son, for striving. You're good. There'll be money. I said it'll come. Ajay gave Olivia an angry look. Lately, Ajay had become aggressive. I guess it was the alcohol, and arguing with a tipsy Ajay was useless. "What are you looking at me for?" said AJ. "Dad, don't. I'll ask my grandparents," Daniel said, realizing that he was the cause of an emerging scandal. What grandparents with a living father? And call me father, not dad. Father, that's all you are. Understand, Daniel? Father, Daniel answered, confused. Calm down. We were just talking to Dania, discussing the matter. Didn't you hear me say no? Olivia said. Of course, if you have to, Dania. How many classes a week? I think 2 classes of an hour and a half. All right, go on, Danielle, we need to talk to Daddy. Thank you, Olivia. I really need this class. I told you what Jay said to Olivia. I'm not a dad. I'm Donnie's dad. Okay, fine. Okay, Dad, Olivia winked at Daniel. As Daniel left to go to his room, EJ continued. Maxime, you demand money for Donnie's classes and you don't work for the man himself. What am I, a printing press? Have you been playing dumb? The money you get for Donnie, you don't spend it all on him. So in the time he's been living with us, I think a decent amount of my money has accumulated. And my labor doesn't count. Did you ask for it? I just don't know why. Maybe you thought you could make a profit off an orphan. Who was just yelling that he was the father. Olivia whispered. So, Daddy, get your ass up and get to work. Teach your son by example. I'll go and work. Oh, it's fresh in my mind, but I find that hard to believe. How long have you been doing nothing? On indefinite leave. You haven't counted. You're sitting on my neck and opening your mouth. You've got some nerve. I'm not sitting on your neck either. What are you drinking to? You don't know I don't take money from you. And your relatives give you money. It's a one-time job. It's time you got a regular job, Olivia said. When I have to, I will, AJ replied. Olivia realized that the conversation wasn't going well, but it was a good thing that AJ hadn't completely drank his brains away and was still working. He drank on sprees, and between sprees he made money. He realized that his love of alcohol would not be tolerated at a regular job, so he worked at home doing term papers for students. And when there were no term papers, he earned money by technical translations. If it weren't for his nerves and alcohol, he could have tutored Daniel in English himself. But no, he couldn't. You have to be able to convey all the linguistic nuances, and that's the prerogative of a teacher, not a technical specialist. When AJ wasn't drinking, he was unbearable. His sullen look, his nagging, especially when Olivia smoked and drank coffee. Whenever he saw Olivia smoking and drinking coffee, he'd start yelling. Sometimes it got to the point where it looked like he was going to hit her. At those moments, Olivia wanted to strangle him, and she probably would have if she'd known she'd get away with it. Aunt Olivia, I'm sorry about the other day. I didn't think Daddy would react so violently. I thought he was asleep and couldn't hear. I wish I'd known. It's okay, I'm used to it, Olivia said lightly so Daniel wouldn't feel guilty. Daddy insists that you call him Daddy. It's the right thing to do. I don't know whether to argue with him or not. Danielle, you know how it ends. Well, if he wants to call me Dad, then call him Dad. What can I do about his drunken ramblings? Maybe you just don't like calling him that. That's a different matter. Then again, he's not going to let you off the hook with his obsession. On the contrary. You know I didn't know my father, and I'm glad my dad wants me to call him Dad. So I'll call him Dad. That made things easier for everyone. From then on, Daniel called AJ Dad, and oddly enough to Olivia too, but AJ tried to live up to that title. He even drank less, and when he didn't drink, he made breakfast for Daniel, as he had for Bridget, and they ate breakfast together. AJ seemed motivated to live. And the whole picture was not to Olivia's liking. She was looking forward to the end. And it turned out to be back to the beginning, and maybe soon, very soon, Daniel would find out that he was really E.J.'s son. For now, you can write it off to EJ's drunken ramblings, but how it will turn out from here on out is unknown. But apparently it was enough for AJ that Daniel called him father. For now. And then Daniel went to the academy, which didn't make Olivia very happy. She wished he'd just go back to his apartment. For so many years she'd had to endure the presence of a child, a mistress, a husband. Not everyone would agree to that. She agreed and even called herself auntie, which she regretted more than once. If Daniel hadn't been in their house, maybe by now EJ would have died of drunkenness. But on the contrary, it was as if EJ was rising from the ashes. No, he hadn't stopped drinking, of course, but it was clear that he was struggling with his illness, albeit weakly. Unwilling, weak-willed EJ fought incredibly. And his binges became less frequent and shorter in duration. He even got better and fresher. He was far from dead, Olivia thought, but there was nothing she could do about it. She couldn't poison him like she'd poisoned her husband. Danny, happy birthday, son. You're an adult now, and you're entering adulthood. AJ wept. Don't forget, no matter what happens, we are always with you and will always help you. At the festive table gathered the closest people, Virginia's mother and father, Olivia's mother Bridget, and her husband. For so many years, everyone had gotten used to AJ calling Daniel his son and Daniel AJ his father. Only Olivia won't get used to it. And it's a good thing AJ hasn't completely brain drunk and claimed his true paternity. After all, he does consider the fact that Virginia's parents are still alive and understands that Virginia wouldn't want everyone to know the truth. Honors her memory, Olivia thought. I don't know what I would do without you, Aunt Olivia, without you, Father, without all of you. Thank you for everything. But I can live on my own now. I've made up my mind. I can, Daniel said, seeing his grandmother's frightened look. I can do it. Don't worry about me so much, he smiled at his grandparents. Daniel's right, Olivia said. He's such a self-reliant young man. He came to us, and he knew how to do everything. Thanks to my mom. She taught me everything. Let's drink to Mom, in her memory. Daniel suggested it. She would be happy for me right now and proud of me. A happy memory to Virginia, everyone whispered, except Olivia. They sipped from their glasses and blotted their tears. And I, Danielle, don't agree with you, moving AJ interrupted the silence. What's stopping you from staying here? Have you been unhappy all these years? I'm fine, everyone, thank you. But as they say, it's time to get used to being on your own. You'll forget us in no time. Saddened, a tipsy AJ. Who am I supposed to make breakfast for? Who am I going to have breakfast with? Olivia, Daniel answered. AJ looked at Olivia and sighed. Danielle, let me stay with you for a week, clean up, and then I'll take in the tenants, Grandma suggested. I'm going to make repairs in the summer, on vacation, and now just to clean up. Stay, Grandma. Under your careful guidance, I'll put things in order. Are you okay, Grandpa? Permission? Grandma asked. I'll allow it. But only for a week. I need it myself. Grandma smiled, Virginia's father, and everyone laughed. When Daniel came home from class, he found his grandmother with the secretary open and a pile of papers and receipts taken out of it. What's this? Daniel asked. What is it, Daniel? Cried Grandma, raising her eyes to her grandson. Yes, Anushka, these are your old letters. Grandma. So it turns out that AJ is your real father? Daniel asked in a trembling voice. Grandma held out a thick notebook to him with a trembling hand. On the pages were entries made by his mother's hand. This is Mom's diary, Grandma said. Flip through the pages, just as it was written. It appears so, Grandma replied. It's so personal, but you have a right to know the truth, Danielle. You're a big boy. Maybe it's time for everyone to know the truth. Maybe it's not, Grandma said with doubt in her voice. What will happen to everyone when they find out? I can't imagine what will happen to Grandpa. I'm scared. What about Olivia? She raised you for so many years without knowing the truth. What do you think, Danielle? What do we do? I don't know, Grandma. I have no idea, Daniel answered. I'll read the whole diary, and then you and I will decide what to do. You look so pale. How sick are you? Do you need any medicine? I'll take a drink and calm down, and I'll call my grandfather. How he is there, I'll find out, said the grandmother, confused. So it turns out how it was. After reading his mother's diary, Daniel thought, it's not that simple. For obvious reasons, Mom didn't want this to be known. So now what? Should this secret be kept further from my grandmother and me or not? I wonder if my dad knows that my sister didn't know about it before either, but judging from my mom's notes. but it's not my secret, and I don't think I should make it public. Who's going to feel better about it? Bridget, Dad, Aunt Olivia, Grandpa. After Mom died, Aunt Olivia became his second mother. It was her choice. So she didn't know that Dad and Mom loved each other and that I was really her husband's son. Because what normal woman would take in the son of her husband's mistress? So if she and Grandma reveal this truth, a lot of good people will suffer. No, we shouldn't do that. Let it go as it is. Life will sort things out. But how he wanted to tell his father the truth, that he knew about their love with his mother, how he wanted his father to know that he, Daniel, knew the truth. Couldn't it be okay to tell his father? Daniel thought. From the lines of the diary, it is clear that my father recognized me as his son. Many questions did not find an answer in Daniel's mind, and he didn't know what the right thing to do was. Between the pages of the diary, he found a photo of his mother and father together. So young and happy they were in the picture. Dad, how much I look like him. I'm just now seeing it, Daniel thought. At first glance, you'd think it was me hugging my mom. Daniel found a suitable photo frame, inserted the picture into it, and set it on his desk. He smiled at the picture of his parents and his thoughts. His mom is gone, but he has his dad, and no one can take that away from him. Grandma, how is Grandpa without you? Didn't you tell him anything? Daniel asked. He only misses me. We were never apart. And now, no, I didn't. What if I had a heart attack, and he's alone there? Grandma, go to him. There's no reason for you to stay here. You looked at me and realized that I'm quite independent. I'll manage. I understand. But my soul still hurts, sighed Grandma. Grandma, stop it. Here, sit here. Daniel sat his grandmother down at the dining table, made tea, poured it into cups, cut a loaf, took out butter, cheese, and sausage from the refrigerator. How am I doing? Smiling, he asked his grandmother. Are you coping? I'm aching for something else. What's going to happen now, Daniel? I'm talking about what you and I found out. Nothing's going to happen. You know my father knows, and I know. And I don't think anyone else needs to know. Grandpa's a heart patient, Mother. Aunt Olivia's old, and I don't think she's in good health either. And Aunt Olivia herself, what if she finds out? I feel sorry for her. Who's going to be happy or healthy, Grandma? No one. Granny sighed. You're so young, Daniel. And how wise you are. Virginia would be happy to see you. So no talking? Silent. Then Daniel agreed. And Bridget, it turns out, is not Jay's own daughter. Do you think he knows that? Danielle asked. Maybe he already knows that, Grandma. You and I better stay out of it. It's not our secret anymore. I don't think so. And I somehow doubt that I, the old me, I may not understand something, replied Grandma. You said that no one needs such truth. Explain to me, and I agree with you. If I didn't, I might tell someone I shouldn't. Daniel often went to visit his father and Olivia activities. Life and Aunt Olivia didn't like him very much. His father was always happy, even when he was working. He'd put his work aside, set the table, treat him. But Aunt Olivia smoked cigarettes and drank coffee, never sat down at the table with them, and never really kept up a conversation. She'd ask, "How are you?" and that was it. Daniel even felt uncomfortable. He'd lived in their house for so many years, everything was fine. Suddenly it's uncomfortable. Why are you so glum, Daniel? His father asked him once as he walked him out the gate of his house. Are your studies not going well? School's fine. You know, Father, when I come to see you in general, I don't feel like Aunt Olivia's happy to see me. It's as if she wants to, but she can't tell me not to come to you. I don't understand. I've lived with you for so many years, and suddenly there's such a change in her attitude toward me. It's not right for me to discuss my wife with you, son, he said. But Olivia is a moody person, and if she's in a bad mood, she's not going to hide it. And to be honest, this woman remains a mystery to me. In all the years we've been together, I've never really understood her. In short, Dad, you come to my place, Daniel suggested. I just moved into Mom's apartment. You've never been to my place. Come on over, because I don't really feel like I'm at your place. I don't really feel, Dad, I feel a little overweight. What do you think? Call me, or I might not be home without a call, Daniel said to his father. You really haven't been to my place. I'll come and see you. Nothing's changed since Virginia's gone. EJ walked around the apartment as if she'd gone out for a minute and was coming back from her memories. Tears came to Ajay's eyes. To keep Daniel from seeing them, he turned to the table and pretended to look at something there. Is this the table where you study? He wasn't exactly here, Ajay said. His heart jumped and froze. Then it pounded so loudly that even Daniel seemed to hear it. Ajay gently took the photo from the table, brought it almost close to his face, shielding the tears from his son with it, and swallowing the lump in his throat, asked, Did you know, Daniel? And how did you forget to hide the photo? Daniel was confused at first, but then thought, that's even better. At least he and his father won't have any misunderstandings. I found out when I moved here. My grandmother was cleaning and found my mom's diary. I got it from the diary. And I didn't tell you. I didn't know whether to speak or not. I mean, the truth could hurt a lot of people. You're right, son. The truth hurts a lot of people, but lies hurt even more, Ajay replied. I'm glad you know. Virginia wanted to keep it a secret for the sake of everyone's peace of mind, but as it turns out, Dad, let's go to the kitchen. I bought a cake. Would you like some tea? I have a terrible sweet tooth like Virginia. She had a sweet tooth too. Come on, we'll have tea. But there's a lot of things we need to talk about. You're an adult. You should know everything. Isn't there anything stronger than tea? Ajay asked. No, Dad, I don't drink. Please don't drink it either, Daniel asked. Ajay suddenly jumped up from his chair and hugged his son tightly. My son, he whispered. I'm sorry for everything. Dad, come on, Dad. Forgive me for what? I have nothing to forgive you for, Daniel answered, hugging his father. Yes, there is, said Ajay. Well, let's go and drink tea. You're kind like your mother. And I was not known for anger. How do you like it, son, stronger? You know I like it strong. I'm sorry I asked for alcohol, Daniel apologized. Sometimes I want to get drunk, go to sleep, and never wake up in pain again. I'm hot tea, Ajay replied. I can't live without your mom. You're the only thing keeping me afloat. But if you loved each other so much, why didn't you live together? I would have left Olivia. I never loved her. Yeah, your mom didn't want that, Ajay sighed. She thought it would hurt a lot of people. She was worried about her parents. How would they take it? Especially since they're neighbors with Olivia's mother. And you realize that now. But Grandma knows now. She found the diary and read it. But we agreed not to tell anyone. We thought the truth would make a lot of people unhappy. Especially Aunt Olivia. That's what Virginia thought, too. Ajay grinned. Olivia? Yeah, she knew all about us, knew and kept quiet. It was to her advantage, he said bitterly. Why? Daniel wondered. How can you stand it? You can't. What about me? How did she put up with me around her for so many years? I have some ideas about that. Olivia's used to being in control, which is why I think you're here. And then she realized that she could hold me back with you. She knew I wouldn't blab to Virginia's memory. You think I don't know that when I asked you to call me father, she chalked it up to my battered brain. In short, Olivia is unpredictable. Well, now your mom's journal has interfered with Olivia's plans besides me. And now you and your grandmother know about it. Who besides Olivia, at this point, is going to be made unhappy by this knowledge? Danielle asked. And Olivia's own mother? She has nothing to do with it. I feel sorry for her, Ajay replied. And Bridget? I guess you know the saying, better the bitter truth than the sweet lie. Don't follow in my footsteps, son, or I'll be in favor of. Lying is not what life is all about. And life doesn't stand still, and mine is about to end. And it turns out that I haven't really lived yet. I've lied, I've dodged and dodged. I'm living with someone I don't love. And it's for the benefit of someone, but not for myself, said EJ with a sigh. Do you think everyone should know the truth? Daniel asked. I do. Yes, everyone, AJ nodded. Can you give me Virginia's diary? At least I want to talk to her so badly. I can, of course, but you'll have to give it back. I'm afraid Aunt Olivia will see it and destroy it, Daniel replied, handing it to his father. I did, son, but promise me that when I divorce Olivia, you'll give it back to me for good, AJ asked. What are you doing? Yeah, I was going to divorce her, but she thinks it's my drunken ramblings. This time I'm going to file for divorce and property division. It's about time you took my last name and legalized my paternity. Let's formalize paternity first, change your last name, and then I'll file for divorce, he suggested. I'd be happy to have your last name, father. But there's more secrets. It's the right thing to do, Danielle. Because Olivia is an unpredictable person. She can do all sorts of things, Ajay chuckled. She's a Medea. Oh, really, Dad? Really, Olivia? No, why would you do that? Daniel got worried. Oh, son, you don't know women. They're the cause of all our troubles. And they make us weak. That's right. I'm kidding, Ajay laughed. But it's time for me to go. The cake is delicious, by the way. I'll bring cake next time I come over. Give me Mom's diary. Just wrap it up in a bag, put it in a bag, because I don't have a bag. Well, his father left, and Daniel felt light and happy. Soon he would have his father's last name. He looked at the picture of his parents and saw several bills of money next to it. His father planted it, Daniel said aloud and smiled. Not believing his eyes, he read the note several times. Vika said Bridget is not Ajay's daughter. I thought she was joking. Even told her it wasn't April 1st and her kind of joke wouldn't fly. It's not a joke, she said. Really, that Virginia still wonders how he didn't get it. Bridget is a copy of her father, Mishka. She is a copy of her father's character. It's a little tough for a girl, but you need that nowadays. It's a time of tough people and grip and tact. My dear friend, do you think all men know who they're raising their own or other men's children? This woman knows who the child is from, and a man can either believe it or not. No, Olivia's not kidding. I don't know why she told me that. Maybe she couldn't bear to keep it to herself. No, of course not. I'm not going to tell Ajay. I don't want to hurt him. Besides, he loves Bridget. Not the kind of father who doesn't even know about his daughter. The kind of father who raised her. Ajay tensed up, his head thudding and pain echoing in his chest area. Bridget, not his daughter. No, he'd never compared her to anyone she looked or didn't look like. He was just sure she was his daughter. Anger swept over Ajay. Olivia had bound him to her. He'd put up with her all his life for Bridget's sake, loved someone else, and tolerated Olivia, even when she annoyed him to the point where he wanted to strangle her. He had. Bridget was always a light in the window for him. He was distracted by his daughter and forgave Olivia her dislike for him. And she, knowing he loved Virginia, forgave his dislike for her. That was how they lived in dislike. Before he went down to the kitchen where Olivia was, he breathed deeply, letting out the anger and all the demons that were pushing him to deal with Olivia. And when he had more or less calmed down, he left the room. You ready to go? Ajay asked sharply. 5 more minutes, and everything will be ready, Olivia answered. Are you hungry? Olivia looked at him, smiled, and turned away to slice bread. Ajay seemed strange to her, confused and tense at the same time. Probably work problems again, she thought and sighed. Bridget's not my daughter, Ajay said, sitting down at the table and keeping his eyes on Olivia. Olivia shuddered and tensed. Someone else might not have noticed it, but he'd learned every gesture she'd made over the years. He'd caught her off guard with his question. She didn't know whether to lie or tell the truth. Why aren't you saying anything, Olivia? I asked you a question, Ajay asked calmly. He calmed the storm that was brewing inside him as he read over and over the paragraph in the diary that said he wasn't the father of his daughter. Olivia tossed the knife she'd been cutting bread with and turned sharply toward Ajay. No, he couldn't read the fear in her face. It was more like triumph. She raised her head proudly and looked up at him, smiling. Well, yes, Bridget is not yours. So now what? I'm wondering how you know that. Virginia knew and no one else knew. And you kept quiet all this time, and now you want to find out. Olivia wondered. What's the point of all this fighting now? No, I didn't. I just found out. You lied, and it ruined your life. Oh, come on, don't be so hard on yourself. Olivia snorted. Virginia had told it in her diary and revealed the secret. So now you're going to give up on Bridget? No, I'm not. I raised Bridget, so she's my daughter and my grandchildren. But when I think that I could have had a different life, a happy life with the woman I love, and because of your lies I missed her, I squeezed her out. But with the woman I love, I would have lived. Don't forget that you met your beloved thanks to me. Olivia smiled. You'd never see your beloved again. Where would you have met her? In a village you didn't even know the name of. I'm a fool. What is this? The snake was pulled out of the wilderness by a friend, the mother of her friends, Virginia. I felt sorry for her, and she returned the favor by being ungrateful. I don't want Bridget to know that I'm not her family, Olivia realized. That's all I want from you for now, and I won't. I know she loves you. Sometimes I think she loves you more than she loves me. And her kids adore you. What kind of evil am I, ruining all this? So Thomas didn't want to marry you. Are you trying to trick me? He didn't even know Bridget was his daughter. I knew even then that Thomas wouldn't make a husband or a father. He's a fickle man, not a husband. That's why I didn't tell him anything and decided to make you both husband and father. Oh, Olivia, you're so full of it. What's the point of rehashing old times, Ajay? We've lived our lives. And you were no angel, upsetting me with your friends and your antics. I raised your kid, you raised mine, and I've seen enough of your drinking. The debts are mine. What's the point of all this litigation now? As they say, you don't change horses at the crossroads. And you and I are already at an advanced age. Or is there something on your mind? Olivia turned on the coffee machine and lit a cigarette. Are we going already? Why is that smoke stinking up the place? Ajay asked unhappily. Olivia put out her cigarette, turned off the machine, and began to set the table. Olivia, I don't get it. For 8 years, Daniel had lived with us, and you treated him like a son? I respected you for it. What's different now? It's like you don't want him to come to us. When he lived here, I was more relaxed. Now it seems like he's coming for you, to take you away. Ajay laughed. Where? Nowhere. Where? Take you away from me, from our house. We didn't love each other and we don't love each other, but still. And tell me, do you believe that those who loved in their youth, after living such a long life as you and me, continue to love each other? I don't know. I haven't lived with my beloved, answered Ajay. And I know a few who have kept love, and the rest are like us, living out of habit. Again, children and grandchildren bind them. And you know what to expect from the one you live with? You're probably right. I think I'm probably right. What do you got there? Can't get enough of the good stuff? Lamb stew? Olivia replied. You're a good cook, that's for sure. Ajay moved his plate over to her. They say that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. That's not true. I didn't reach your heart with my sincerity. Well, maybe it's not too late. Maybe I will. Flirtatiously looked at her husband, Olivia. I took the joke, smiled Ajay. And I'm not joking. I do not want to spend my old age alone, even though we live without love, but habit is a serious matter. I know that you are up there, upstairs, strictly teaching your translations, that I should prepare food. Our grandchildren come and enjoy us, and we enjoy them. If all this is ruined, how can we live again? It's too late, Ajay, it's too late. And you're going to be alone. The kids have their own lives. It'll just be the two of us. Or do you think you'll meet another one like Virginia? You won't. There'll always be new people to compare her to. And she'll make the others pale in comparison. It's a long shot, Ajay. It's not the right age. Think about what I told you. Think hard. Have you noticed that we haven't really talked to each other in the last few years? Ajay asked. And today, what I found out today, did what I found out today set us off on a revelation. We talked, and it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Ajay smiled. Bridget's pushing us toward each other again. Or is it just some kind of obsession? You women know how to work your magic, don't you? An hour ago, I was ready to kill you. And yesterday, I wanted to divorce you. Ajay smiled. I guess the stew does have that effect on me. And now what? What now? Olivia looked at him anxiously, her hand reaching for her cigarette. Now, I don't know. I don't know anything, Ajay replied. I know. Olivia turned on the coffee machine. You don't have to break what you already have. If you promise that you won't divorce me, won't walk away from me at the sight of bread, tea, and coffee, then I'll accept you like family. And please, Ajay, stop drinking. Stop drinking. You can stop drinking. I know you're strong. Is he strong? She really thinks so? Ajay was surprised at his wife's words. She always thought he was weak. Now all of a sudden. Or is this another one of Olivia's tricks? And you stop drinking liters of coffee and smoking, said Ajay. Can I not smoke? Yes, you can. When I'm nervous, that's when I reach for a cigarette. You can drink coffee, but if you drink a little, you can't drink too much in your heart, said Ajay, smiling. Daniel knows I'm his father. He got it from Virginia's diary, Ajay said. Olivia shuddered. I'm going to give him my last name. I wanted to keep it a secret from you. But you blabbed, Ajay continued. Then everyone will know. Almost everyone knows. Then he'll claim our house. That's right. Bridget is the heiress, and Bridget is our daughter, and Daniel is our son. I don't want to lose the house. Olivia's lips quivered and she cried. I've put so much effort into it. I want to live in it until the end, until my end. I feel it as mine. And the house feels it. I've grown into it. So who's chasing you out of it? You want to divorce me? Which means if anything happens to you, Danielle's going to want a piece of it. My house would be torn apart. Olivia wouldn't stop crying. Which means I'd be torn apart. She finished one cigarette, but she should have smoked another. Her hands were shaking, her voice was breaking, and he looked at her, her shoulders were shaking. But on her tired and already not young face, and he felt incredibly sorry for her. He caught himself that in all his life he had never once pitied her. And she had never cried. Never. And now Olivia and he, Ajay, were getting weaker. Ajay realized she needed him. And he needs her. Need her, strangely enough. And not just because he suddenly felt love. Pity is stronger than love. He just realized that now. He went to her, took the cigarette from her hands, put it out and hugged her. The one he had been ready to kill an hour earlier. Don't cry, Kiran, don't cry. Everything will be all right. No one will ever kick you out of this house. We'll just make a will for each other, and if either of us dies. Anyway, is that any way you believe me? Not stopping crying. Olivia nodded affirmatively and hugged Ajay. Will you forgive me? She asked Ajay. There's nothing to forgive, Bridget. My daughter, Ajay replied. Olivia just said he was strong. She was wrong. He's weak in front of women, in front of their tears, weak. Women have a way of making men weak. How do they do it? Ajay thought, holding Olivia in his arms. Having overheard a strange conversation at her grandfather's funeral, Exusha hurried to the old apple tree. And barely in P4. As to what Sabrina hated sad funeral ceremonies. Well, of course, no one asked her permission to live or go beyond the boundary from which no one could return. Right now, she knew as soon as she saw Charlotte on her smartphone screen. She knew it was bad news from her neighbor. Sabrina, hello, darling. Charlotte's voice came through. It's Aunt Charlotte calling. I'm sorry to break the bad news to you this morning, but your father's phone isn't working, so I've had to break it to you. Vincent died recently. I go to work and I see him doing something under the apple tree, half turned towards the street. I'm waving at him. Vincent, good morning. Godspeed. I asked him what he was doing early in the morning. Was he raking or picking up fallen fruit? And Vincent had no emotion. He didn't even move. Though you know my voice is loud, it's impossible not to hear it. So I went to the gate, opened the latch, came up to Vincent, and he wasn't breathing. I'm sitting here on the porch, and I've called all the services, except the funeral parlor. It's not up to me to see Vincent off. But Sabrina, honestly, I have to go to work. Would you come? Sabrina replied in a husky voice. "Of course, Aunt Charlotte. I'm leaving now. I'll be there in about 30 minutes." The sad news that her paternal grandfather had passed his last frontier came as a shock to Sabrina. Vincent, always cheerful, was something she hadn't expected. She had to go, of course, organize everything, call everyone in her grandfather's phone book. But she wanted to convince herself, shiveringly, that this conversation with her neighbor was just a bad dream. Now I should open my eyelids wide and look at the call history. Make sure the call never happened. Unfortunately, that hope was not realized. There had indeed been a call from Aunt Charlotte, and Sabrina did her best to get to her grandfather's cottage, which was technically located within the big city but in the private sector. As soon as she got into the taxi, Sabrina asked her boss for time off. Then she had a short conversation with a colleague in the office, explaining where the documents were, for which, as it turned out, today clients had to come. The most difficult call the girl did not dare to make: how to inform her parents that they have to cancel a trip abroad to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the wedding. That they had to return urgently to say goodbye to Grandpa Vincent. Sabrina felt sad. What an unexpected tragedy. She'd spoken to her grandfather just the day before yesterday, and he'd told her he was expecting her to visit. He asked her to come soon, not for the sake of tending a small vegetable garden, but to consult on something. Sabrina promised him a weekend, which had recently passed. She could well have visited her grandfather, but she was a little ill, postponed the visit, apologized. They chatted for a while about nothing. Grandpa Vincent recalled the way his wife Shirley, Sabrina's grandmother, had always done things. The girl heard that she should brew linden blossom, wait until the infusion cooled to a pleasant warmth, stir a spoonful of honey into a glass of the healing liquid, drink it, and lie down under a blanket. She promised that she would heal herself and then visit him. And in the first month of autumn, when she was scheduled to go on holiday, Sabrina promised to stay with him for at least a week. God, what a shame, Sabrina thought now, regretting that she was going to wait for a holiday. After all, it took about 45 minutes to get to her grandfather by public transport. When there were no traffic jams on the roads, it was possible to head not home after work, but to a loved one who had lived a little over a year and was incredibly bored alone. All the more embarrassing was the fact that Sabrina was free and could keep her lonely grandfather company, traveling to and from work, even by taxi, more expensive than public transport, but quick and comfortable. Alternatively, Sabrina could simply leave the house a little earlier to walk in the private sector to the transport stop where the tram of the desired route departed. Everything would absolutely have been solved, somehow managed and sorted out. But she had not had the foresight to realize that Grandpa Vincent required care and supervision, and that his requests to come were not a mere whim, but the wishes of a lonely elderly man. Sabrina felt an agonizing sense of shame. And sighing, she tried to call her parents. However, both her dad's and mom's number were out of range. The girl had to send an email, hoping that the unpleasant news would not be read too late after solving the rest of the issues. The time on the journey to her grandfather's house flew by. Sabrina stepped out of the taxi and, after listening to Aunt Charlotte's sympathy, felt a real grief come over her. Her neighbor hugged the girl who had arrived, told her to hang in there, and ran to work. Sabrina looked at her grandfather and waited for him to get up, pull himself up and call her into the house or into the arbor with grapes. However, the miracle did not happen. The neighborhood services that arrived on the call conducted another ritual associated with the passing of the older generation. The paramedic pronounced Vincent dead, presumably from a heart attack. She advised Sabrina to contact the funeral agencies and explained that they had specialists who could organize grieving procedures with due respect for the deceased and sympathy for his relatives. Sabrina heeded the advice and tried with all her might to hold back the bitter tears of despair. It was not until dinner time that the girl was alone. Sabrina entered her grandfather's house, crying when she saw the phone on the table, which he had apparently forgotten on his last morning. Probably if he had had the mobile phone, he would have been able to call somewhere and ask for help. But there was no changing the past. Things just happened the way they did. The girl had discovered the hiding place that Grandpa Vincent and Grandma Shirley had told her about shortly after she came of age. The man then pulled back the rug hanging over the bed, pressed gently on one of the wooden panels, then with a slight movement slid it aside. Surprised, the girl saw a deep vertical niche. Grandfather explained, "Here, granddaughter, these are our funeral ones." Shirley and I have been quietly putting money in here, so as not to be a burden to anyone. Sabrina remembered how she had started nagging her grandparents back then, said it was too early for them to be thinking about such a topic. She assured them they'd have great grandchildren to nurse. No, my dears, that won't do. First, you'll have to consider my fiancé approve, and then you'll have to help raise the babies. Mummy and Daddy are always busy. Grandmother, stroking her smiling granddaughter's head, quietly objected. Sabrina, it's not like we're asking you if it's too early to think about your last journey in this world or not. We're just showing you so you know just in case. After all, Vincent's 70th birthday is this year. And I'm a little younger. Alas, at that age, anything can happen. Your parents know about the stash, of course. What if they're shy or modest? Grandpa Vincent supported his wife. We don't want to be a burden to you. Well, let's get this conversation over with. Grandmother hurriedly changed the subject and began to talk about the amusements of a little kitten she had picked up, unpretentiously nicknamed Man. Now, 6 years after this conversation, the skinny little boy has turned into a well-fed, long-haired, and independent handsome. His owner's departure was a real shock to the animal, and he even lost his excellent appetite for a few days. However, Grandpa Vincent managed to bring the cat out of this state, and now this mission fell to the share of Sabrina. It seemed to Sabrina that the orphaned cat understands everything, and that's why he curled up in a ball on his grandfather's bed and doesn't even react to the sound of the refrigerator door opening. The agency recommended by the ambulance lady really turned out to be professional. A serious man suggested Sabrina to organize a farewell not at home, but in a special ritual hall at the cemetery. It was much easier to get there than here, in the private sector. And the house, though big, would still be cramped. There is no fuss and crowding. The hall there is convenient, comfortable, said the man. Everyone will be able to say goodbye quietly, and without the crush that usually accompanies the removal from the flat or house. Everything will be touching and civilized. Besides, it will save you a lot of trouble. Sabrina thought it was a reasonable suggestion, but she had to spend not only her meager savings but also Vincent's grandfather's stash to pay for the funeral. She did everything necessary, as if in a daze, waiting for her parents to arrive, or at least to reply to an email, but in vain. Sabrina contacted the hotel where they had booked the room, but as she understood from the reply in broken English, Mr. and Mrs. Robinson did not check in. They explained that they had decided to change their plans slightly. Sabrina was worried about her parents, but there was nothing she could do. Clods of earth began to fall on Grandpa Vincent's coffin lid, but neither his son nor daughter-in-law showed up. It was Sabrina who received the condolences and sympathy, and she had to listen to the lamentations of the distant relatives who had come to see the old man off. Some unashamedly spoke out about the irresponsible son and daughter-in-law who did not attend the mournful event. The girl defended her parents as best she could, and the guardians of other people's morals were silent for a while, transferring the conversation to other topics. Gradually, only relatives and the closest of neighbors remained at the memorial table in a small cafe. Sabrina, who had last seen most of them just under a year ago at Grandma Shirley's farewell, could hardly stand all the questioning. She wanted to run away from the cafe, but she had to fulfill her duty as a granddaughter to the end. From time to time, she took out the dirty dishes and brought memorial treats along with the waiters. As long as she didn't have to sit at the table listening to the loud conversations of those gathered. By chance, Sabrina overheard part of a conversation between Aunt Charlotte and Grandpa Michael's cousin as they served another batch of pies. Vincent used to talk to that apple tree like a person sometimes. I told him when Shirley was alive that we should cut that useless tree down, Michael said. It's grown over the roof of the house, and you can't get apples for nothing. Shirley, God rest her soul, used to complain about how useless that tree was. One year it bore so much fruit that you'd be tired of putting it away. The next year it didn't bear a single fruit. She kept threatening to cut it down and plant some summer tree like a peach. Only Vincent, a blessed memory, always stood up for the apple tree. Aunt Charlotte nodded in agreement. You're right. I thought it was strange, too, Vincent's fondness for that old apple tree. If it was a hectare of land, it wouldn't be too much of a waste of space. But in such a small area, it seemed silly to leave such a huge tree. A snippet of conversation made Sabrina think. Indeed, grandfather treated that apple tree as a living thing. The girl had often seen him affectionately stroking the bark of the tree as he passed by. One day when Sabrina was a child, she decided to play and climbed up on a branch, which broke under her weight. Grandfather Vincent left his granddaughter in his wife's care and began to treat the wound on the tree himself. Lately, after Grandma Shirley's death, Grandpa had preferred to rest alone under the apple tree, rather than in the specially built gazebo covered with grapes. Thoughts of the mysterious apple tree Vincent had singled out briefly receded before the sad worries. The relatives were the last to leave the rented hall, and Michael reminded Sabrina. Someone has to spend 40 days and nights at Vincent's house. Would you be okay alone until your parents showed up? Maybe I should send someone with you. At least take my Tracy, my youngest daughter, with you. Sabrina noticed the look on Tracy's face, a woman of about 35 who clearly had her own plans for the evening and had no desire to spend the night in a place she didn't know. Thank you, but I can really manage on my own. After all, it's kind of a token of my respect for my grandfather. Saying goodbye to everyone, the girl hurried home from the public transport stop, as her relatives had to go in different directions. Barely opening the gate of her grandfather's house, Sabrina had time to regret that she had tried to create an image of an independent and strong person. Of course, she wasn't too young to be afraid of an empty house, but she'd already spent a few nights here all alone. Would she be able to cope? She began to ponder again the reason why the tree held such an important place in her relative's life. Pensively, the girl stroked the sad cat. But being in the house, even in the company of an animal, was somehow uncomfortable for her. Sabrina went out into the yard and, obeying a sudden impulse, approached the apple tree, on which somewhere high hung green small fruits. A chill ran down her back. When she saw the scratches on the ground, there was no doubt that Grandpa Vincent had left those marks. It got really creepy when Sabrina had the crazy thought that the dying old man was digging up the ground, not in agony, but trying to dig up something. The girl went to the barn, took a small garden trowel from there, and returning to the apple tree, began to carefully dig into the ground. Almost immediately, the trowel hit something hard. Sabrina began to dig with the utmost care and soon pulled out of the shallow hole a hard rectangular package wrapped in a bag and additionally sealed with duct tape. The girl had never heard any stories about family heirlooms and was truly shocked. At home, Sabrina laid an old towel on the table, already asking for a well-deserved rest somewhere in a landfill. She laid her find on it and carefully opened the package with the kitchen knife her grandfather always kept sharp. Beneath the layers of duct tape in the package was a metal candy box. The girl held her breath as she opened it and saw not jewelry or money inside, but papers. Sabrina scrutinized the contents of the box. There were envelopes underneath double-folded notebooks, clearly written in her grandmother's smooth handwriting. Judging by the fact that the package was quite modern, with the emblem of a chain supermarket, and the paper was neither frayed nor yellowed, the girl concluded that the find had not been in the ground long. Thinking that it wouldn't be a big deal if she knew what Grandpa Vincent had tried to dig up before he died, Sabrina began to study the find, turning first to Grandma Shirley's notes. My dear Vincent, I am writing you this note of confession, realizing that I do not have much time left in the world, and that it is wrong to take this secret away with me. Forgive me, Vincent, for the deception and even the crime I committed many years ago because of my love for you. It's hard to confess, but I must. You and I were married then. My daughter was in kindergarten, and I was back at work at the post office. Everything was going so well, I was jealous of myself. And then, like a blow to the head, I sorted through the mail and saw a letter addressed to you. The sender was one Marian Lopez from Center City, Texas. I got a bad feeling in my heart. I didn't give it to you. I read it myself. That's how I found out about your affair while you were digging up virgin land in Kansas. Your ex wrote that it was her strict father who arranged your separation in 1964, threatened to kill you or put you in jail using his connections for having an underage relationship. In fact, he left her only option was to lie to your eyes that she didn't love you one bit and didn't want to see you again. The mother tried to stand up for her daughter, but it didn't help. The woman was simply beaten by her own husband for daring to interfere. When Marion saw what your father had done, she was terrified for you. That's why she said what she was told to say with conviction. After this brutal confession, you predictably flared up, packed your things, took an apple sapling as a souvenir for your parents, and returned home. She wrote that she was pregnant by you, and to hide the sin, she was married without official registration in the registry office to some widower, with many children in a remote settlement that did not even have a name. I read Marion's letter in the dark, and even began to empathize with your young lover. She complained that her family life had failed. The man she had to live with treated her like a servant. Marion named her baby girl, your daughter, after her mother, Cheryl, despite the scandals with her in-laws. The unfortunate young mother was literally enslaved. She endured beatings, humiliation, and relentlessly planned her escape. When her daughter grew up, Marion found it even harder. The native children of this so-called husband began to abuse the girl, and her mother could not say a word in her defense. The beating started right away. It was only after 5 years that Marion managed to escape from her husband. She did not give details, but from the blurred letters, from the spilled tears, it was clear it was very difficult. Marion asked you to come and fetch her and her daughter at this very center. She said she would wait for you. When I read the letter, it was as if I'd gone blind and deaf all at once. I didn't know how I was supposed to go on. Giving you the message meant losing my family. We only had a 3-year-old daughter. How could I take away her father with my own hands? How would she grow up without you? I confess, I destroyed that first letter, threw it in the oven. I thought I was protecting my family. I was wrong. Marion continued to send letters. The next one came almost a year later. Apparently she was timing it so you'd hear from her and her daughter on your birthday, asking why you didn't answer her. How could I have been afraid that she'd pack up and come to you? It's not that far, maybe a little over 300 miles. Or something like that. So we're almost next door to someone who could ruin my life. If I can burn the letters, it's the people that's more difficult. What am I supposed to do with a woman and a child? I started to think how I could keep them away from you. I wrote a letter, copying your handwriting and your name just in case. I promised I'd come as soon as I could. You probably don't remember how I persuaded you to move, but you wouldn't agree. So I lived like a volcano. I didn't know how to protect my happiness, how to save it if you found out the truth about your daughter. I didn't take holidays or sick leave with Wilfred at work because of it. Then you realized 5 years later that it's only once a year that woman bothers you. I felt a little better. I burned the letters for a long time, for a few years. Then I felt as if I was ashamed. I started hiding them. I knew there were places in the house you'd never think of going. The only thing was that I couldn't leave my post office because of my fears, and I refused the post at the main post office. But that's all right, I got used to it. How long did I write to you? But I saved only 10 messages with the last letter, which came from Beaverton in 1994, and I did a mean thing. In it, Marion wrote that her health was failing, that she needed medication. And although Cheryl was trying to support her, she was always short of money. Obviously, it was a time when people were scared and unstable. The whole country was in a fever. Marion didn't ask for anything for herself. But of course I couldn't be completely calm. What if she came to our land? What if she decided to see you? I sealed the envelope carefully and returned it with the note the addressee has dropped out. After that, the stream of letters from Marion dried up. I wish I'd done that before. I don't know. It wouldn't have been a problem in the first place. Now I don't know what to do with the letters. In fairness, you should read them, but not while I'm alive. So when you hear the bitter story of Marion and your daughter, I'll be gone. Forgive my selfishness, but I could not have done otherwise. I loved you too much, and I didn't want to leave my son without a father. I don't care anymore. Wilfred's all grown up and my granddaughter's a bride. So the way to Marion is clear. I only ask you to wait at least a year after I'm gone before you look for your first love and a daughter you've never seen. Endure this period of mourning in honor of all that was good between us. And then do what your heart tells you to do. Forgive me for everything. Loving you, Shirley. Sabrina was shocked to read the note. The story of tragic love, years of deception and hard confession touched her. Involuntarily, the girl thought that perhaps Grandma Shirley should have kept her secret forever. And on the other hand, realized that it was too cowardly. Of course, it was easier to judge from the outside than to find oneself in such a stalemate. And Sabrina couldn't imagine what she would have done in her grandmother's shoes. Would she have told her lawful husband that her friend still loved him, and was waiting for him, together with their daughter? Or would she have tried to shield him from this literally amazing information by any means imaginable? It was clear to Sabrina what Grandpa Vincent wanted to talk to her about. Surely, as the year's grace period that Grandma Shirley had asked him for was coming to an end, he wanted advice on how to find his long-lost lover. It had been a long time, and it was possible that Marian had long since changed her common surname, Lopez. Her daughter Cheryl, Sabrina, and her father's blood sister could also be married. Trying to distract herself from the unexpected information she had received, Sabrina folded the leaves back into the box and put it in the wardrobe, not daring to read the letters Marian had sent to her grandfather just yet. The girl subconsciously feared that some more details of her loved one's private life might be revealed. Grandpa Vincent was languishing alone, except for the fact that his old dog Buddy was napping next to him. It was boring, so Sabrina started cleaning, though it wasn't really necessary. She took out a bucket of dirty water to splash it in the far corner of the plot, where the rose was still modestly green, but which would be covered with a scattering of golden buds in autumn, and she saw a car pull up to the gate. Sabrina's parents, who had finally returned from abroad, got out of the car, and she was incredibly happy. Even if this meeting was with a touch of bitterness, but at least the excitement for her parents had receded. In the course of a confusing conversation, it became clear that they had traveled to a place where there was no communication or internet access. They had received a sad message from Wilfred and Patricia's daughter when they reached civilization just before Grandpa Vincent's funeral and had hurried back. However, they were still late. Sabrina was relieved that she now had the support she so desperately needed. After hugs and tears, when everyone was already at the table, she began to tell her father and mother about the unusual find. The girl took the box out of the cupboard to prove her words. Together with her parents, she once again read aloud Grandma Shirley's handwritten confession. Then they studied the surviving letters. In one of them was a picture from the photo studio. It showed two pretty girls who looked only remotely like Kansas natives. The two beauties were clearly related in appearance, but they looked more like sisters with a slight age difference. The inscription on the back of the photograph, however, indicated that they were Grandpa Vincent's first love and their mutual daughter Cheryl. In beautiful handwriting it was inscribed, "In memory of my beloved Vincent from Marian and Cheryl on her 16th birthday. We hope to see you again. 1981. Wilfred, forgetting his respectability, even whistled. Yeah, to say I'm surprised is to say nothing at all. How did Mum manage to keep it all a secret, not give away her knowledge for so many years? I have no idea." Patricia, with whom her mother-in-law had a marvelous relationship, was also puzzled. Against all notions of family life, they had had so many heart-to-heart talks. But Shirley had never said a word about the fact that somewhere far away her official husband had a lover and an illegitimate daughter. It wasn't easy to come to terms with such news. Patricia asked, "Wilfred, do you think we should find your sister and her mother? If she's still alive, of course, or should we let things stay as they are?" The man himself didn't know how he should react to what was happening. From what he had learnt from his daughter, his father wanted the secret of his youth to be known. On the other hand, was it ethical to intrude into the fate of a woman who was a stranger, but a blood relative? She appears to be in her late 50s, and this Marian herself is probably in her 70s now. Reminiscing about her difficult youth and the man she once loved so much but never waited for could be detrimental to her health. Plus, as Shirley's grandmother wrote, after she sent the letter marked addressee dropped out back, they stopped coming altogether. That could mean both that Marian believed the lie and that she was desperate. Alas, however, the most unfavorable events in the fate of a woman and her daughter could also have happened. Sabrina said, as if voicing her thoughts aloud. Still, it seems to me that we should at least try to find grandfather's daughter, just to sort of rehabilitate him. After all, it's not Grandpa Vincent's fault that things turned out this way. I think it's only fair that the whole truth be known to Marian and, of course, Cheryl. Sabrina said. "Listen," Daddy turned the girl to Wilfred. "How do you feel knowing you have an older sister, a blood sister? Do you feel like seeing her, socializing with her?" The man was confused and asked his daughter himself in response. "And you, Sabrina? Cheryl is your aunt, by the way. So you're curious to meet her, then?" Sabrina listened to herself and admitted, curious, and a little scared. The family was divided. Patricia, after listening to her husband and daughter, declared, "I think we should leave things the way they are. There's no point in disturbing something that has long since healed. More than half a century has passed. Maybe Marion is happy with another man. And here we are greeting, so to speak, relatives. I don't think it's quite right." A long conversation did not help to find a compromise. In addition, all the family members themselves were not sure of the correctness of their thinking. In the end, the Robinsons went to bed so they could visit Vincent's final resting place in the morning. "Sorry I'm late," Papa Wilfred whispered, standing by the freshly wreath-covered mound. "Never realized I wouldn't see you again." The man placed 4 scarlet carnations on the empty spot and bowed his head, hiding his tears. After Wilfred, his daughter-in-law and granddaughter placed flowers on Vincent's grave. Each of the grieving relatives realized that they were subconsciously waiting for a sign of what to do with the information that had come upon them. They did not speak of it aloud, but Wilfred, Patricia, and Sabrina were all waiting for a revelation to come upon them. Perhaps it was naive and foolish, but they wanted to know what Vincent wanted. As much as the Robinsons hoped for a clue, they couldn't get one. It was with heavy hearts that they returned to the flat. They decided that Wilfred would stay in the house for the time being, and his wife and daughter would visit him in their spare time. While Patricia helped her husband to pack at least a minimum of necessary things, Sabrina hurried to the nearest shop to buy for the grieving man some particularly tasty food. She felt sorry for the cat, who seemed to have lost his luster and appetite. After consulting with a serious-looking woman, who gave the trolley bags of wet food, Sabrina gave her grandfather's pet some goodies and returned home, holding out a bag of food to her father. "Man is a little cranky right now and may refuse the food," the girl asked. "Try feeding him from the palm of your hand. He usually starts eating as a sign of respect." Wilfred smiled at his daughter. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. You'll brag about your cat." The days flew by. Sabrina and her mother Patricia went to work, and in the evenings they talked about everything, as the girls had been used to since their early childhood. Of course, they also talked about the secret that Grandma Shirley had kept hidden for so many years. On the 9th day, they decided to hold the wake of Vincent's soul at his house. It seemed like the right thing to do. There seemed to be fewer people than in the cafe after the funeral. But the fact that Patricia had decided to make the cakes herself instead of ordering them from a bakery as a sign of respect for her father-in-law had made Sabrina tired and Sabrina tired and Sabrina tired. But the memorial treats turned out unusually tasty, as if someone from above helped to cook. They sat together heartily, remembering various incidents from the past. Wilfred gently tried to ask his great-uncle, "Michael, is there anything you can tell me about Daddy's youth?" The older man was happy to talk and spoke in a sing-song voice. Vincent was always brave for any good cause, responsive and determined. When he came back from the army, he went to the factory to get a job in the personnel department. As his mother told me later, he heard from someone that young people from our town were going to the Virgin Lands. It was not a novelty then. The film about the dashing guy had already come out, very inspiring. And in general, everything was on the rise. Everyone wanted to help the country. It was a united effort. And Vincent, after returning from compulsory service, decided that he would be more useful there, on the Virgin Lands. I admit, wanted to go with him, but where would I go? I was only 15 years old at the time. Vincent was 5 to 6 years older than me. So he went to Kansas. He learned to drive a truck in the Army and got his license. He came back almost 5 years later. He brought back some seedlings as a memento of his long business trip. Of course, he had changed during this time. He was a naive, idealistic boy. He came back practically a grown man. Not because he was my kin, but to be fair, Vincent had not become worse. You'd be hard-pressed to find a man like that these days. Golden hands and a decent character. They welcomed him here at the car factory with open arms. Non-drinker, hard worker, honest. What else can you ask for? He's greedy for work. And so he'd take off his last shirt and give it to someone else. Oh, the men respected him. He never refused anything they asked him. And women were crazy about him. And he was very respectful to everyone. Then he got married on holidays. She worked at the post office, and one day the company car broke down. Vincent was driving by and couldn't leave his colleague in the lurch. That's how they met. They met briefly and got married. It was a small wedding. My mom even resented it, as if it was a shame. But when you were born, Wilfred, that's when Vincent got excited. There was a big party in the courtyard family, neighbors and colleagues. Everyone was invited. There didn't seem to be any delicacies on the table, but that wasn't the main thing. The atmosphere is much more important. Yes, there was a time when all the neighbors were almost like relatives. Michael interrupted his memories to quench his thirst with a cool, tasty compote. Although there was nothing new he had learnt that the Robinsons didn't know, it was still nice to hear the kind words about Vincent. After Wilfred, Patricia, and Sabrina were the only ones left in the house, the female side of the family cleaned up, leaving the only man, save for the cat, to sort out the makeshift benches. Tired Sabrina went to bed on her favorite cot and had a strange, incredibly realistic dream. The girl was not even frightened when she saw her grandfather Vincent and his favorite Japanese woman. The man stood under the tree, gently stroking the bark and looking at his granddaughter, asking, "As the apples ripen, take a few and give them to those you knew. Don't forget, Sabrina, please don't forget." Grandpa Vincent looked away, as if trying to see what was happening over his granddaughter's shoulder. Sabrina turned around to see what or who the man was interested in, but it was empty. When the girl's gaze returned to the apple tree, the grandfather was no longer under the crown. Outside the window, the wind whistled and birds sang, pulling Sabrina out of her dream, which had left a vivid impression. There was no doubt that Grandpa Vincent had sent word, the sign she needed to make the right decision. Of course, he had made his wish clear. At his request, Sabrina would have to make a trip from the other side of the world in the autumn, so that her grandfather's longtime lover and their common daughter would know the truth. Shocked, Sabrina did not hide from her parents that she had seen Grandpa Vincent in a dream. Wilfred was even a little annoyed that the late Papa had visited his granddaughter, not him, in his dreams. But the wise Patricia supported both husband and daughter. It was the right thing to do. Out there, beyond the realm of reality, there must be rules. On the eve of the holiday, the whole family was busy preparing for Sabrina's upcoming trip. The girl's attempts to find Cheryl on social networks were unsuccessful, although she patiently browsed through hundreds of user pages from all over the world, not just her home state. Sabrina planned to leave on the first day of her holiday, so as not to delay the decision on the issue, which was already delayed for many years by the will of her grandmother Shirley. The girl's parents, trying not to betray their excitement, helped their daughter to pack. They were most responsible for the forthcoming transport of apples, which Sabrina had dreamed her grandfather had ordered her to take with her. Patricia placed a rectangular plastic basket without a handle in a rather compact but capacious gym bag. She carefully stacked the ripe fruit there, laying each layer with parchment paper on her husband's advice, and the main load, carefully covered with a towel, was packed. Sabrina added the minimum number of items to her bag and set off on her journey. At the girl's request, her parents only walked her to the taxi. Although the daughter promised to call and report the results of the search, Patricia and Wilfred were worried about their daughter. It was not at all certain that the search expedition would be a success, and a meeting with a woman from Vincent's past could lead to unpredictable results. Thanks to a carefully planned route and the absence of any unforeseen circumstances, Sabrina had no trouble reaching the town where Vincent's grandfather had received letters for so long, some of which he had been able to read only after his wife's death. The town seemed to her to be a rather cozy settlement. The coming autumn had already touched the trees with gold and made it especially picturesque. Private houses were peacefully neighboring with apartment buildings, near which there were small vegetable gardens and even polycarbonate greenhouses. The girl approached the house whose address was written on the envelope. There was an intercom on the door of the 5-story building, and Sabrina hesitated for a few seconds. Although she had prepared herself morally for the trip, and even prepared a small speech before the difficult explanation, she suddenly became afraid. Overcoming herself, Sabrina dialed the number of the flat she was interested in on the keypad. "Hi. Excuse me, can I speak to Marian Lopez and her daughter Cheryl, please?" she asked, hearing a pleasant female voice coming from the speaker. "Come in," came from the speaker, and the door opened. Sabrina was greatly surprised that the stranger whose voice came from the speaker did not ask her name or the purpose of her visit, but there was no time to ponder. Breathing deeply to calm herself, the girl went up to the first floor, where a not-yet-old woman was waiting for her behind the open door. Shirley gazed at her face, but tried in vain to recognize Cheryl in the stranger, considering that the photograph showed her at the young age of 16, and more than 3 decades had passed. It was unlikely that such a dramatic change had taken place. Outwardly, the woman was of a very different type, and she looked about 40 years old, maybe a little more. How could one tell the age of a modern, self-conscious woman, which the stranger was undoubtedly? Sabrina said a friendly hello. "Hello again. I'm the one who bothered you. Could you please tell me how to speak to Marian Lopez?" The woman carried on the conversation freely, even friendly, as if she had known Sabrina for years. Hello, if you're not joking. Where are you from?" The question surprised Sabrina, but she answered honestly, though she didn't see how it mattered. The woman, hearing the name of the town, softened and invited her into the flat, where she asked another strange question. "What are your grandfather's last names?" "My grandfather's last name on my dad's side is Robinson, and on my mum's side it's Jackson," was a phrase that had a strange effect on the woman. She asked nothing more, fidgeting. In spite of Sabrina's excuses, she led her into the kitchen and moved a plate of delicious, ruddy cakes. She offered tea, coffee, homemade compote, and holding out a glass of the sweet drink to her guest, explained. "Marian was my mum's best friend. Cheryl was my nanny and big sister. We survived together, even when there was nothing to eat but potatoes grown in the wasteland. We only saw meat once in a while. When Aunt Marian was planting, she was so worried and afraid, and hoped that one day they'd be looking for her. She told my mum to tell no one how to find her and her daughter, except a man named Robinson or his descendants. She was very fond of one Vincent Robinson. A daughter is a daughter, the fruit of their love sinful and sweet." "Yes, that's right. Vincent Robinson is my grandfather," Sabrina confirmed the rejoinder. "He was my grandfather. He passed away recently. It was only afterwards that it came to light that he once had his first love and their shared daughter living here in your flat at this very address. It's not Grandpa Vincent's fault he didn't find them sooner. It's just the way things are." The landlady took a notebook out of the cupboard, tore out a piece of paper, took a pen, and flicked through the pages. She began to rewrite something, not forgetting to be cordial. "Are you eating? Drink. You came straight here from the railway station, didn't you? Have some refreshment. You'll have to go to Sacramento to meet Marian or Tracy, to meet again. And you didn't move." "We had to, even though it was incredibly hard to part with each other. It was almost like we were family. But after Aunt Marian ran into an acquaintance of the man who kept her as cheap labor, I was afraid to stay here. It's easier to get lost in a big city. Here, I wrote down their address and Cheryl's phone number for you to make an appointment. Knowing Aunt Marian, I'm sure she's still waiting to hear from her beloved Vincent. But it's better if you and Cheryl call. Arrange a time and place to meet at their place, not too well in the house. The daughter's husband is a real creep. The first time I saw him, I was scared. A man standing there, smiling at you, but his eyes were contemptuous and evil. As Aunt Charlotte told me later, he helped her daughter a lot when she got a new job in town, and she fell in love without noticing any of his faults. When she did, it was too late, like a fly caught in a spider's web. No matter how hard Aunt Charlotte tries to keep him away from her daughter, she just can't seem to do it." Alice was silent. Apparently she herself was troubled by the situation, but she didn't know how to help the woman she considered practically her sister. Sabrina tried not to look hungry, but she couldn't refuse the tasty treat. She belatedly remembered the rules of etiquette. "Excuse me, my name is Sabrina. Thank you so much. Your pies are delicious and your compote is wonderful." The woman was very sweetly embarrassed. "Oh, come on, that's good." Alice pounced with questions. "My name is Alice, and please don't use you to me, it makes me uncomfortable. By the way, Aunt Marian taught me how to cook. She's really good at cooking. Listen, Sabrina, do you have any money for the journey? The taxi fare will be insane, but it's faster than the train. I'm sorry it's not much, but I can give you 1,030. Sabrina was struck to the core by this offer. Some Alice, a seemingly quite modern young woman, in her simple-minded and open demeanor was like the positive characters from the old films that grandparents loved to watch. Such goodwill made Sabrina's nose pinch, and she hurried to reassure Alice. Don't worry, my finances are fine. Thank you, Alice. I'm very pleased to meet you. Thank you for the treats. It's time to move on. Sabrina looked up the cost of a taxi to her destination on the app and sighed. Yes, you're right. The price is something unbelievable. That's okay. I'll gladly take the electric train. Alice didn't let her guest off that easily. Wait, let's look at the schedule of trains and trains passing by on the internet. Maybe we'll even book a ticket at once. Otherwise, why are you wasting your time in the waiting room? You better keep me company here. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Sabrina nodded, agreeing with Alice's wisdom. But the caution was unnecessary. It turned out that with time to get to the train station, it was almost time to say goodbye to the hospitable woman. Almost out of the flat, Sabrina hesitated briefly. Opening her bag, she pulled out several large, flavorful apples and held them out to Alice. These are apples from Grandpa's garden. They're delicious. I don't know how else to thank you for such a warm welcome. Alice was embarrassed again, but accepted the apples. I can't resist such incredible flavor and beauty. They're just like a picture. Say hi to Cheryl. By the way, with your permission, I think I'll let her know you're going over there. Let her get Aunt Marion ready, or she might have a blood pressure spike or a heart attack or something. Sabrina had no objections, and bidding her new acquaintance a warm farewell, she went to the railway station. She sent her parents a detailed account of how she had been met by the helpful Alice. She told them that Marion and Cheryl had moved, but she had their new address. Her mum, who was clearly worried about her daughter, replied almost instantly and asked her to be careful on the road. The girl light-heartedly promised to look around carefully and not to get involved in any dubious ventures. Fortunately, the atmosphere in the carriage was quite calm. Some of them were gazing thoughtfully out of the window at the scenery, which was becoming less and less recognizable in the darkness. Some of the occasional fellow travelers were dozing, and Sabrina wished she could be as immersed in her smartphone as most of the passengers in the carriage. The charging level made it necessary to refrain from that luxury. Almost at the moment when the departing day crosses the boundary of night to be forever in the past, Sabrina found herself in an ancient town. The girl thought with belated regret that she hadn't realized to take care of booking a hotel room in advance. After all, to appear in Marion's flat at such a late hour was somehow quite awkward. She felt a little uncomfortable, but ordering herself not to be a coward, she quickly, before the smartphone finally ran out of battery, orientated herself how to get to the nearest hotel. Luck favored Sabrina. The receptionist, smiling, even as if sincere, offered a small but, according to her, very cozy room. Sabrina was soon settled into her temporary accommodation, and after putting her smartphone to charge, she showered, had a snack, and lay down on the bed. Although the time was late, the mattress was comfortable and no loud noises penetrated the hotel room. There was no sleep in either eye. Still, in the morning there would be the meeting for which she had traveled. And again there was anxiety. The girl thought for the 100th time what to say to the innocent victim of deception. How to apologize for her grandmother. And in general, in what style to talk. After all, if with good-natured Alice everything somehow turned out to be very easy, it does not mean that communication with Marion and Cheryl will be as pleasant. Although only managing to fall asleep towards morning, Sabrina woke up a few minutes before her alarm clock. The disturbing night, thanks to the girl's youth, had left no noticeable marks on her appearance, and at 10 she ventured to call Cheryl. The woman answered almost instantly. It seemed as if she had been expecting the call. She probably had. After all, it's not often that relatives who didn't know about each other meet. Having quickly arranged to meet at a cafe near the hotel, Cheryl was the first to end the call. Surprisingly, the choice of a neutral public place to meet had finally calmed Sabrina, on whom her recent acquaintance with Alice had made a most pleasant and even reassuring impression. Well, there's just no way such a sweet, kind woman could be friends with and consider bad people her family. So both Marion and Cheryl are at least quite adequate. Besides, in a cafe, surrounded by people, it is unlikely to come to a violent expression of emotion, and there is less risk that Marion will get too nervous. She transferred the basket of apples into the spacious shopping bag she had thoughtfully brought with her and set off. As she approached the cafe, Sabrina spotted a slender woman on the porch of the establishment, whose features looked like the girl from the pictures in Marion's letter. "Hello, Cheryl. I'm Sabrina Robinson. It turns out my grandfather is your daddy, the girl said hello first. The woman smiled. A pleasure. Completely sincerely speaking. I was told by Alice that she had a wonderful experience, and her judgment, as life has shown, is to be trusted. Come on, I'll introduce you to Mum, and we can have a quiet chat. She is waiting for us inside. The introduction procedure was remarkably smooth. Marian was friendly, but with ill-concealed interest in the face of her favorite man's granddaughter. To somehow break the lingering silence, Sabrina held out a bag to the woman. These are some apples from Grandpa's garden. Marian pulled away from studying Sabrina's face and looked inside the bag and aghast. Crazy. This is the real variety. The woman carefully pulled out one fruit, sniffed it, holding it gently as if the apple were a living thing, and without addressing either Sabrina or her daughter, spoke softly. It was noticeable that Marian was anxious to express all the pain she had accumulated. Vincent and I once dreamed that we would live in a house with an apple tree around it. Not just as a fruit tree, but sort of in honor of me. My full name is Marianne, which means apple blossom. It's such a shame our dreams didn't come true. I was only 15 when we met. In my native land, however, all girls grow up early, ripe for married life with the man they love. Vincent was 9 years older. I wasn't embarrassed by the age difference. I lied to him. I told him I was an adult. He didn't think I was lying. We loved each other, forgetting everything. I guess the higher powers made me pay for my lies and my sin. And this terrible punishment is also reflected on my daughter. The woman stroked her daughter's hand, who blushed like a boiled crayfish and fell silent. Sabrina, who listened to her without interrupting, confessed. It wasn't a higher power that intervened in your life at all. It's much simpler and more hurtful than that. Grandfather Vincent received some of your letters only after the death of his wife, my grandmother. Sabrina detailed everything she knew herself and, not forgetting to mention her strange dream, summarized. So I came here to make you all aware. Both my parents and I thought it was the fair thing to do. I'm sorry your love had such a tragic history, but nothing can be undone now. Marian held the apple in one hand, pressing it to her heart with the palm of her hand, the other wiping away the tears that were stubbornly rolling down her cheeks. Neither Cheryl nor Sabrina knew what to say or how to comfort the woman in her grief. There was a silence, like an unspoken moment of silence for Vincent's death. They had not yet ordered drinks and food. Marian, as if waking from a daze, suggested, "My dears, why don't we take a walk down the street? I'm feeling a little short of breath." Sabrina and Cheryl agreed without hesitation, although the look on the waiter's face when he didn't wait for an order, or at least a tip, was simply disgruntled. No one seemed to care about him at all. Three members of the fair sex were pondering the vicissitudes of fate, and how outside interference ruins the most wonderful dreams. Her daughter wanted to take the bag of apples, but Marian stopped her. "I'm sorry, but I don't want to part with these apples." The long handles allowed her to hang the bag on her shoulder, so it wasn't too heavy to carry. Marian asked Sabrina to tell her everything she knew about her grandfather, what he did for a living, what he liked to watch, what he liked to wait, other everyday details. The woman seemed to absorb the moments that passed her by and smiled quietly. Perhaps she imagined that she herself had been living next to him all these years. The almost idyllic walk was interrupted by the ringtone of Cheryl's mobile phone. The male caller was shouting so loudly that even from the distance of the alley, Sabrina could hear everything he was saying. "Why the hell aren't you home and at work? I was in a hurry, driving like a madman, and it's like a bad joke. Where are you wandering? If I find out you're cheating on me, I'll kill you, your lover, and your mother. I want you out of my flat." The stately Cheryl seemed to grow smaller as she listened to the tirade. The lights in her eyes went out, and she replied briefly, "I'll be right there." And Marian became visibly agitated. It seemed the voice of the man who had called was familiar to her, and this man did not evoke the slightest positive emotion in her. Cheryl began to say goodbye to Sabrina, and then turned to her mum. "Look, I'm going to run. Marcus seems pissed off already. You two talk some more. There's probably a lot of things you'd like to talk about." Cheryl hurried away, and from that moment the ease of Marian and Sabrina's conversation seemed to evaporate. The girl understood that the woman was terribly afraid for her daughter, who, as it was easy to understand, was in a relationship with a real tyrant. Soon Marian confirmed her young companion's conjecture. I have the impression that my daughter is continuing my bitter story of slavery at the mercy of a cruel, overbearing man. However, unlike me, she got married officially, and with great love. At least 15 years ago it seemed that way. I was so happy for my daughter. Marcus always treated me and Cheryl with respect. But as soon as he could talk me into adding my savings to the shared flat, things started to go sour. One thing didn't suit him, then another. While I was living separately in a rented room from my daughter and son-in-law, and did not realize how everything really was. Then, 5 years ago, I got seriously ill and went on a long sick leave. My employer laid me off, so I had to ask Marcus to move into their one-bedroom flat. I felt I had a moral right to do so, but of course it was awkward. I hid my pride and asked to stay with my daughter and Marcus. That's when I realized they weren't doing well. There was always some sort of grudge against my daughter. Jealousy, hurtful words, in a milder form than I'd been subjected to in the past. But every accusation against Cheryl was a punishment. Recently, he's been harping on my infertility, even though he's always said that his back is interfering with our life plans. I get the impression he's provoking Cheryl into divorce, and then we'll end up with some kind of cubbyhole when we share the flat. I realize now that Marcus is going to divide everything down to the last spoonful. That she and I will be like two blades of grass that can't be broken. I don't have a law degree. Cheryl's a long way from it either. We can't financially afford a good lawyer. Sabrina didn't know how to console the unfortunate woman who had never in her life been able to lean on a man's reliable shoulder instead of throwing herself into the fray on her own. Alice's friendship with her mom seemed to be the only bright spot in her fate. It was not easy, but when the problems try to solve not one person, already at least morally easier. And Marian confessed. As soon as I lost my full-time job and started baking at home, the delicate balance collapsed. Everything went downhill somehow. Although the standard of living even seemed to have improved. I could probably pay my rent again. But it's ironic. I'm just afraid for my daughter's health. Oh, I'm so afraid Marcus is going to start laying hands on Cheryl. And right now my heart is restless, like some kind of trouble is coming. Sabrina, I hate to drag you into our family squabbles, but come to our place, please. Marcus needs to tone down his arrogance in front of you. That's what he always does in front of strangers. He behaves enthusiastically and even self-consciously, playing the role of a model husband. If you ask our neighbors, they'd probably all agree that my Cheryl is incredibly lucky to have him. Sabrina immediately agreed to keep Marian company. Soon, after a few bus stops and a short walk down the street, they were inside the flat. A muffled male voice could be heard coming from one of the rooms. Now I'm going to teach you how a husband should be greeted, because you need to put the idea in ditches like you not to twist your tail in the absence of your lawful spouse. Marian opened the door and saw Marcus grab Cheryl by the neck, lifting her off the floor in a state of some irrational anger. The woman took the bag of apples off her shoulder and knocked her son-in-law on the head. The man, never letting go of his victim, slumped to the floor. Cheryl wheezed from coughing. "Mom, what are you doing? What fly bit you? What if you fractured Marcus's skull?" The woman slowly walked over to the couch, sat down on it, and asked, "Cheryl, nothing will happen to Marcus. You better get me some water and a sedative. Drops my heart starting to pound." Sabrina, meanwhile, was looking closely at the man. He was clearly stunned, but not too badly, and was already making attempts to get up. He had a dazed look on his face. Marcus was in no hurry to get up and rubbing the back of his head. He looked angrily at Marian and threatened. "Don't even think you're going to get away with this. I'll go to the trauma center, get the beatings taken out, and put you senile old woman, behind bars." Cheryl's hands shook as she handed the cup of medicine to her mum. The woman began to urge Marcus to take it easy, but he only became more vocal and threatening. "You'll go to your death, and then you'll die in the state house. And with your health there is nothing to be there. A woman, as they say, is easier on the horse than on the mare." Unexpectedly, Marcus' tirade was interrupted by Sabrina, who, together with her grandfather and father, had watched various detective shows and had little but valuable experience in calming down even the most inadequate visitors and suppliers. "First of all, I'm calling the police here right now. I saw you trying to hurt Cheryl with my own eyes. So Marion's actions may well be classified as grievous bodily harm in self-defense." Sabrina couldn't understand how she'd had the audacity to call a grown man some criminal code numbers from the depths of her subconscious. Probably the stress had taken its toll. She was so dashingly inserting phrases from her head, some legal terms, that Marcus, under the fierce pressure of the stranger, visibly staggered, and then, carefully rising, left the room, throwing his wife. "You are lucky I have a strong head, or you would have been a widow." When the man left, Sabrina took a seat on the couch next to Marion. The woman began to apologize to her guest. "I'm sorry, Sabrina, for what happened." Inside, though, the girl was all shaking with anger. She managed an almost calm reply. "Nothing to apologize for at all, Cheryl." Cheryl stood against the wall and listened to what was going on in the kitchen, where Marcus had gone. Then she rushed in, much to the surprise of her mom and Sabrina. The man was climbing the cupboards in a fit of rage, throwing everything out of them onto the floor. Marion quietly called out to her son-in-law, "Marcus, be quiet. I hid my stash a long time ago. As soon as I noticed that the note started to disappear from it. You won't find anything in the kitchen. Don't get your hopes up." The man was crushing groats and pasta with his feet, not knowing where he was stepping. He walked out of the kitchen, nearly knocking down Cheryl, who was in his way, and soon slammed the door loudly. Marion and Cheryl began to clean up Marcus's mess, and Sabrina joined them without hesitation. To the objections of her hosts, the girl confessed. "I feel partly a little guilty for everything that has happened, so of course I won't stand aside." The mess in the kitchen was almost cleared up when Marcus appeared in the doorway, accompanied by a man in a police uniform. "Hello, Lieutenant Norman Morris, Precinct Commander. Marcus asked me here to look into the circumstances of the battery." Marion sank into a chair in exhaustion. Cheryl glared angrily at her husband, who on the contrary was cheering. While the women were cleaning up, he had hustled over and literally dragged the law enforcement officers into the flat, greatly exaggerating the extent of the conflict. Sabrina slumped against the wall at Marcus's insolence and blurted out to eliminate the possibility of a trick from this man with a rotten, petty soul. "Excuse me, Norman. May I see your ID?" The lieutenant produced the ID and began his questioning. As Marion began to recount what had happened, Sabrina asked permission to make a phone call. Morris did not interfere, and the girl hurriedly dialed her father's number. Wilfred listened to his daughter without interrupting, and then said, "In general, now Oliver will call you back. He is well versed in such matters. You put the phone on speaker, and I think he'll be able to resolve the situation favorably and without hassle." Sabrina's father wasn't wrong. Marcus's look of triumph melted as the policeman, who had seen the red fingerprints on Cheryl's neck during the phone call, began to cast disapproving glances at his insolent husband. The lawyer insisted that the lieutenant also take a statement from the woman who had been assaulted by her husband, and this speech had a marvelous effect. After the mutually amiable conclusion of the telephone conversations, Morris asked Marcus sternly, "Do you still claim that your mother-in-law hit you with a heavy bag? Out of the blue? The picture of this incident is quite different. You, Marcus, practically made a false call and lied about it. Unfortunately, it's not a prosecutable offense, but you could get a fine. I'm going to write down everything as it happened, and I'm warning you at once, don't lie to me again." When Marion showed her terrible weapon, with which she had hit her son-in-law on the head, the policeman could hardly contain a smile and involuntarily admired the large apples. Marcus, having read and signed the document, cursed and swore at his wife, her mum, and their inexplicable young protector. The police officer reprimanded the man, and he left the flat in a rage. Norman turned to Cheryl and said, "I will advise you now, not as a neighborhood officer, but just as a human being, do not tolerate such an attitude. Further, as experience shows, such marriages do not lead to anything good. Divorce before it's too late." Cheryl thanked the precinct. "Thank you, Norman, for your informal approach. You've dealt with the situation fairly." Marian put almost half of the apples Sabrina had brought in a bag and handed it to the police officer with the words, "Please take this as a token of appreciation. I am very sorry that my intemperance caused my son-in-law to disturb you." The policeman shrugged his shoulders, saying it was his job, and then, as if shedding the veneer of officialism, asked with admiration in his voice, "How did you manage to grow such beautiful apples? At my parents' dacha this year, almost the entire crop at the stage of wilting hail beaten. What is not beaten, then during the frost rotted." Marian smiled. "I did not hope to admire such apples myself. It's the famous real variety. These apples were generously brought to us by Sabrina, our volunteer advocate, from another state, where a good man had brought a seedling from another country many years ago. Despite the difference in climate, the tree took root. The neighborhood officer thanked me again for the apples. Just in case, he dictated his phone number and left the flat after saying goodbye." In spite of the happy resolution of the problem, Marcus's petty revenge in the form of calling the police was a rather exhausting event for everyone. Marian jokingly declared, "That's enough cleaning for today. Where have you seen this? She comes to visit us and we give her a broom and dustpan. Basta, girls, let's take a break. Let's close the table in my room. This situation is making us hungry." Sabrina was removed from the party preparations and hurried to call her father to tell him that the conversation with the lawyer had helped her out of a very difficult situation. Wilfred and Patricia, who knew from her husband a slightly different version of events, were relieved when their daughter told them. Even at the age of 24, Sabrina was still the same favorite little girl for her parents, whom they wanted to protect, to cover with their care like a dome, impenetrable to any evil. As Alice had said, Marian was an incredibly skillful cook. Sabrina enjoyed the seemingly simple but delicious dishes. After tea with amazing homemade sweets, Cheryl asked her guest, "Can we have a Skype video call with your dad? I would at least like to meet my only sibling remotely that way." Sabrina confessed, "My parents asked me that too, but I didn't know how to suggest it. Is it convenient?" Marian splashed her hands. "My clever girl, what a good idea you have. Hurry up and get everything set up." Just a few minutes later, Wilfred's image appeared on the laptop screen. First of all, the man began to apologize to Marian. "It's hard for me to say this, but the happiness of my parents' family and my own carefree childhood was actually built on a foundation of your misfortunes. Most likely, if the letters from you had reached my father earlier, he would have found a way to help you. However, my mother was probably afraid that he would leave everything and ask for a divorce, and go to you and the daughter he never got to meet. I sincerely apologize to you, Marian. I want you to know that you can always count on me. Sabrina will leave you my phone number and other contacts. Feel free to contact me anytime you need me." Sabrina stayed with her hospitable hosts into the evening, listening to Marian and Cheryl talk about herself and her family. Despite the rather odd circumstances of their acquaintance, neither felt the slightest bit awkward. Cheryl confessed, "I had no idea I'd suddenly have such a wonderful niece." As Marian watched Sabrina, she saw a subtle, almost imperceptible resemblance to Vincent's similar facial features. The dimples that appeared when she smiled, the funny habit of wrinkling her nose and frowning her eyebrows. For so many years, the woman remembered the one man she loved desperately. And then, as if out of habit, hoped for a meeting. And now there was no chance of seeing him again. It was incredibly sad. And the only consolation was that Vincent had not forgotten or betrayed her. He had naively believed what she had said. That was the only thing she could reproach him for if she wanted to. Countless times Marian had imagined that she had misconducted that fatal conversation. If only then, more than half a century ago, she had had the courage to tell her lover that his father was threatening to do away with him if she had offered to run away. Vincent would probably have found a better way of dealing with the problem, though. If only she had told him honestly years ago. They'd probably be together now, just as they'd dreamed. Maybe things would have turned out better for Cheryl, who would have felt her father's care and support in her personal life. Marian was incredibly sorry that she had failed to protect the fragile love. But she could not blame the woman who had become Vincent's lawfully wedded wife. After all, it was she, Marian, who had rejected the man she loved, even under duress, so there was no need to look for fault on the other side. It had been a long, eventful day, and after a long meal and much conversation, the table began to yawn, one at a time or all at once. Sabrina flatly refused to be escorted back to the hotel. "Don't worry, please. The taxi will take me directly to the place, so there won't be any complications. As soon as I'm in my room, I'll let you know." Marion and Cheryl said goodbye to Sabrina as a close relative, with whom not only blood ties but also friendship. Before getting into the taxi, the girl waved to her new acquaintances, looking out of the window, and did not notice how from the bench at the neighboring entrance, Marcus, filled with anger, was watching her. The man thought that this strange young upstart, whom he had seen for the first time in his life today, was to blame for the bad day. Come to think of it, he'd taken a slight hit, and Cheryl had been so over it that she'd left the house and hadn't even thought to put him on notice. Clearly the matter was unclean. He, as a husband, had every right to teach her how a decent woman should behave. But this girl, instead of apologizing, started arguing with him, explaining that she had done nothing wrong, so he cut off her breathing a little, so that she would not be punished. And then the angry fury came in at the wrong time and hit him on the head with all her might. Marcus rubbed the back of his head, feeling the painful bump, and continued to think about the hurt he'd suffered. It probably wouldn't have turned out so well for his wife and her mum if it hadn't been for the unfamiliar face. She'd been the devil to show up at their flat today. The man was sure that without the support of this educated wretch, they wouldn't have dared to make a peep in his direction. Not only that, but he would have been able to convince the police officer that the women were conspiring against him. Only this young sheep Sabrina, as it was written in the report of the district officer, had a trump card. After the intervention of an obviously competent and knowledgeable lawyer, he, Marcus, had to leave the flat with nothing, although he also had the right to the living space. However, the fight for her still ahead. In the meantime, we have to deal with these insolent women. It's useless to break in now to his wife and her mum. They're probably locked up with all the locks and chains. But it's the right thing to do to catch up and teach the runaway a lesson. Marcus sat on the bench like a predator in ambush, watching for the defenseless sheep to leave the flock and be at his mercy. The man even chuckled, glad to find such a comparison. But the wait was prolonged. The autumn evening, gentle and merciless, already hinted that the planned hunt would not take place. Marcus was shivering, whether from restrained rage or from hunger and cold, and was about to leave. But then the door opened, and a fugitive jumped out into the street. Marcus' joy was a little premature, for the insolent sheep had got into a taxi. But that only made the man more excited. The chase was on. Luckily, the cars were side by side. In the meantime, the city's heavy traffic would keep the would-be victim out of sight. Sabrina was already gripping the front door handle of the hotel, wishing she could collapse on the bed and get some sleep. But she heard a voice behind her. Sabrina, or should it be Bizarre? The girl automatically turned around and lost precious fractions of a second. Marcus, whose voice she recognized perfectly well, was rapidly approaching her. Sabrina turned away and, trying to get into the hotel faster, started pushing the doors the wrong way out of fright. When at last rescue was at hand, the man grabbed her by the waist, turned her round to face him, and threatened her in a feignedly affectionate tone. "Where are you going in such a hurry? Let's have a chat, shall we? Explain to me, why the hell are you meddling in my family life? Why don't you say anything, you sheep? How long has it been since you got punched in the face for your big mouth? Who asked you to interfere?" The girl prepared to shout loudly and thought about how to get free. But she didn't have to look for rescue on her own. She couldn't see how the policeman, who was already in civilian clothes, came out of the ajar door behind her back, but she was incredibly happy when she heard. "Marcus, you're absolutely wrong right now. Let the girl go." Marcus instantly loosened his grip and started to justify himself to the policeman. "Norman, I just came to talk to you. Then I wanted to take you for a walk to show you the city." As the policeman left the hotel, he asked, "Sabrina, if you wouldn't mind waiting for me in the lobby. I have something to arrange with Marcus." Sabrina sat down in a comfortable chair. A few minutes later, the police officer sat down next to her and confessed. "You know, I actually came to see you. When my parents saw the apples, they were so distraught. They asked me to arrange with you for a cuttings from this tree. My father wants to graft cuttings and try to grow such beauty too. I can't count the number of times they cheated me with varieties in the markets. On the picture one thing but grows completely different. So I came here to the hotel, and as it turns out, not for nothing. The girl smiled. She liked this young and very correct and principled policeman. In gratitude for her rescue, she promised to send him as many cuttings as he wanted when she got to her grandfather's cottage. Sabrina and Norman, who asked to address him simply, without middle names, exchanged contacts and said goodbye. The man did not want to part with the charming girl, but he could not find any reason to stay with her. Sabrina thought, I guess there's a reason Grandpa Vincent sent me to find Marion and Cheryl in my dreams. He also told me to bring apples with me. Events after meeting the relatives began to develop with frightening speed. Cheryl divorced from Marcus, and since in Sacramento they and Marion practically nothing held, after the exchange of the flat they moved at Wilfred's invitation to his father's house. The man offered wholeheartedly. Since I am aware of my mother's guilt, let this house be at least a small compensation for all your suffering. Marion sat at length by the apple tree, carefully nurtured by her lover, stroking it like a living thing. Sabrina, who was always a welcome guest, was glad that the old woman had found peace, albeit belatedly. In Vincent's granddaughter's personal life, the sweet fruit of the apple tree also played an important role. Correspondence and regular telephone conversations with Norman made it clear that their affection was mutual, and that it was growing stronger with time. Soon the lieutenant moved to the city to his favorite girl, explaining, well, why, policemen are needed everywhere, and if necessary I can learn another profession. Cheryl also found her own personal happiness, having met the brother of Aunt Charlotte's neighbor. Marion stroked the apple tree and whispered softly, Thank you, Vincent. I know for a fact that it was you who helped to organize everything so well. A widow with many children sheltered astray on a frosty night. Then one day she came home early and froze when she saw ... MP4. Amanda was tidying up the mezzanine. Almost through tears, every single thing she picked up had something to do with it. Old shoes, carefully filled with copies of newspapers and packed still in their native boxes. Folded in 3 legs artificial Christmas tree. A box, sabers, wicked garlands used to still manage to shine in the hands of her husband. A cardboard treasure trove of Christmas tree toys, ski equipment. She froze for a second. Traitorous tears protruded in her gray eyes, unwilling to dry. The children must not see her longing and hopelessness. Away with the sadness. We must pull ourselves together. Her mother's anguished voice came to mind. Amanda, don't hang around all that junk. The top storeroom is a bunch of junk. I'll be sure to get there and throw everything in the bin. I didn't get there. I didn't throw it out. I didn't have time. Not only that, about Amanda's father, the harmful neighbor Chloe liked to joke that she was born of a passing young man, but also her mother burned in a week. The doctor's verdict sounded dire. A worsening ulcer. Too late. You, my dear, came to us. Massive internal bleeding. We couldn't do anything even on the operating table. There was no time. The surgeon in blue uniform cast a pitying glance at the girl huddled on the couch near the operating theater and hurried away into the labyrinth of the hospital corridor. Amanda was left a complete orphan. She had no one in the world now. Yes, her mom complained of occasional stomach pains, but that this would be a death sentence was a shock to Amanda. A fierce, formidable, so combative woman. She seemed to show her power to everyone around her. Healthy, her daughter was pulling her own hump until she was 20. Almost brought her up and taught her. In the yard of their old 5-story building, she managed to keep order. First as the best in the whole neighborhood janitor, then in the role of manager, head of housekeeping. So in all hypostasis, she proved herself that all superiors were always calm in this house. Neither tenants nor electricians nor plumbers are not amused. Joyce will bring them all to their senses in no time. They'll be walking like silk. Mother was a self-taught intellectual with a high school education. She spent all her spare time reading books. The library in the neighboring house diligently sowed reasonable, good, eternal in the masses. She wrote and expressed her thoughts competently. In life, you cannot say that from the janitors appointed by the chief of the yard was inept. Household needs knew by heart. The entire large team of housekeeping on her literally prayed. She got a 2-room flat at the place of her work only 5 years ago. Before that, she lived in a servant's room for janitors with her daughter. And when a lonely old woman died on the ground floor, she was given a flat for her many years of endeavor. Now Amanda got the flat. The girl finished school well, easily entered the pedagogical institute, dreamed of teaching children Russian language and literature. When Joyce died, she had just finished her 4th year. Ahead of her was an internship at the school, and then the defense of her diploma. The only thing she didn't know was what to live on now. How was her mom going to make ends meet on her small salary? And she also dressed her daughter decently. It was a mystery to Amanda. The stash in the bookcase of the metal sesame box ran out almost immediately. At least the tenants contributed to the funeral expenses. The rest was taken care of by the communal workers. After sitting for a month on cereals, pasta, potatoes, and tea and sugar, as Joyce always used to stockpile food from her salary, Amanda realized that she needed to find a job. She wouldn't last long without a new injection of cash. In a month's time, she would be starting her 6-month teaching internship. That meant she would only be able to work in the evenings. How not to remember where many successful businessmen and film stars started their careers? The answer lay on the surface: a waiter in some cafe or bar. A suitable place was found surprisingly quickly in the beer bar favorite, making money on broadcasting sporting events with beer drinks and light snacks. The waitress had just quit. The perky, fast-talking girl had run out of patience. And all because of the fact that the audience in the hall, with a huge TV set on the whole wall, showed emotions in a peculiar way about scored goals or missed goals. In a burst of joy, some red-haired guy would pour the rest of his beer directly into a round hole in the center of the table and float a small coin in it. Another would roughly kick a waitress passing by a table with a full tray. A third one would push the table, jump up angrily and start walking in circles around other tables, not allowing the employee with the next portions of foamy drink to move freely around the hall. The manager of the establishment saw this disturbance, but their bar was on the outskirts of the city. Its contingent was made up of local laborers. They did not seriously damage the property. They would make some noise and then go home peacefully. Even fights happened only a couple of times and ended in the beginning with a couple of slaps without serious damage. Amanda was told about the vacancy in the bar favorite by her neighbor Chloe, who knew all the news in the district before the district police and grandmothers at the entrance. She caught the girl in the entrance and snidely whispered in her ear, "Amanda, I thought you were looking for a job, not Dusty." "Well, I got you a job, Sebastian. You know his bar, the favorite? He's got Jenny, who's off shift today. Go and have a chat with him. He's a nice bloke, he won't hurt you." Sebastian greeted Amanda with the clinking of glass beer mugs. There was muffled whispering in the huge place, as the dishwasher and the cleaning lady talked to each other. The latter had just scrubbed the floor to a perfect shine, but curiosity got the better of her. Where did Sebastian go? Does he think that an hour before opening he'll find some idiot from the street to take the place of a waitress? Only nobody wants to put up with this drunken crowd. I told him to take my apprentice as a waitress, but he said no. He said she was old. Where have you seen a woman at 47 years old being written off? Let her suffer now without a waitress. Eva also joined the conversation. "Oh, you're right. I offered him my sister Jacqueline as a waitress, and she's only 40. But he refuses. He only wants a younger girl for our hot guy customers, so that she makes their blood boil, as if they were waitresses." Was that a good thing? She was always carrying those mugs around with a sour face. She's got a husband at home, so why make eyes at someone else? Behind the wall, 2 young guys were nimbly taking pizza dough out of cardboard boxes, then pushing them into a large oven. Sebastian's new acquisition and pride is a special pizza oven. The purchased dough bases were smeared with mayonnaise, and then toppings were placed on them either with sausage, or with fish, or simply with grated cheese. Jacqueline and 2 of her fellow students worked at the favorite bar. They were on an apprenticeship from culinary school. Sebastian didn't have a big kitchen. For hot meals, pizza from the oven at most. For snacks, an endless amount of pre-packaged snacks and industrial products: dried smoked fish, chips, dried calamari, spiced nuts, cheeses, sliced smoked sausage for toast and bread, breadcrumbs with salt and pepper. It's impossible to list everything. The bar didn't bother with plates, forks, spoons. The customers included all the disposable plastic utensils they used in the bill. Another thing, beer mugs. There was a whole collection on the shelf above the bar. The owner brought this glass from different cities where he visited. The refined versions were for VIP clients, brought from Prague and Munich. The rest, more simple, bought in souvenir shops. It was in such an environment that Sebastian met Amanda for the first time. In the beer bar for sports fans, there was not yet a single bartender out of the 3 bartenders working here. They will be here by the beginning of the shift. After all, bartenders are the elite of the staff environment. The girl climbed the stairs, pushed the door open with determination and froze, adjusting her eyes to the semi-darkness in the huge room. All those present turned their heads towards the open doorway, like statues. In front of them stood a young girl of medium height, a fine figure, an inquisitive look of dark gray eyes, a russet fluffy ponytail of hair carelessly gathered, a little pulled down because of a bright hairpin. Light summer jeans, a t-shirt with an intricate print, light white trainers on her feet. That's pretty much the whole portrait of the stranger. "Good afternoon," Amanda said in a ringing voice. "Can I see Sebastian?" "What do you need him for?" Eve answered cheerfully. "He's not here now. He's away on business. And I'm in no hurry. For me, it's either work or he's gone." Amanda grinned. "How so?" The women were as curious as magpies. "If I don't get a job here, tomorrow I'll go to the world with a bag," Amanda explained calmly. And there was so much bitterness in her words that Eva and her companion forgot all the barbs, choked and stared at the girl in expectation of confession. And Jenny and the boys pulled themselves up, all craning their necks to hear better. "I'm not going to tell you much, my dears," Amanda continued. "I became a final orphan a little over a month ago, a student at Pedagogical University. I have to go to practice in the mornings, and my scholarship is only to pay the rent and buy bread and milk, nothing more. I live 2 blocks away. If your boss hires me, I'll try not to let anyone down." At the sound of the door opening again, all heads turned simultaneously. Sebastian himself squeezed into the place, again with a cardboard box in his hands. "Sebastian, did you bring new glasses and mugs again?" Eva called out to him in a friendly manner. They had known each other for years. Once in their youth, Eva had been behind the counter in his first beer bar since the Soviet times. Then she'd given up, grown old. But she didn't want to part with her Sebastian. So they followed the boss from bar to bar, until they organized everything here from scratch, having taken over the old diner from the negligent owners. Eva scrubbed and dusted every inch of the hall on her elbows and knees. Everything around shone with cleanliness and newness. Immediately after the opening, people started to come to the favorite. A penny dripped into the cash register. Her kind Sebastian blossomed and fussed. "Come in, Chief," this time his faithful assistant said. "While you were traveling, we found a new waitress. Intelligent, not like me, but a good girl. We've already interviewed her. She's a good fit, so we're going to take her on tonight and test her out. And we'll see what's what. Let's get Jenny and Jenny working four-handed." And so began Amanda's first day of work, which determined her future. By the beginning of her pedagogical practice, Amanda had already mastered the favorite bar so well that the rest of the staff thought they had seen this noisy, always dissatisfied young lady. As if such an unpleasant girl had never worked in their home-like friendly team. Discipline suddenly settled down in the hall. The regulars didn't turn on the pretty Amanda with bad antics at all. And if someone tried to get handsy at first, the others looked at him in such a way that he felt sick. Sebastian only hummed approvingly. Eva soon gave her summary. "Amanda's a smart one. Men can tell from a mile away that you can't lose with her. She's not rude, she doesn't sling mud, and she's not sticky. She works hard and takes care of her clients." 6 months flew by. Amanda fully mastered in the bar, deftly carried in her hands at the same time 4-liter mugs of foamy nectar. At the same time, she never familiarized herself with the guests of the establishment, clearly keeping them at a safe distance. The New Year holidays flew by like a comet across the starry sky. The year 2014 had arrived. By the beginning of February, Amanda had completed her teaching practice reports. 2 state exams were behind her, and she was admitted to the dean's office to write, and then to defend her diploma. Everyone was looking forward to the Winter Olympics in Athens. The country had won the right to welcome athletes from all continents. The most avid fans bought tickets for matches and competitions in advance. Regular visitors of the favorite were looking forward to cheering for our country here in the bar. In the atmosphere of general jubilation, they shifted mugs with beer when our team will stand on the highest step of the podium, or will be sad if they give up the championship to faster and more agile, and maybe more fortunate rivals. It was impossible to watch the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games at the stadium in February 2014 without a lot of emotions and a lot of libations. Beer was flowing. Passions were running high. When the American Olympic team appeared on the platform to the track of a famous band, everyone at the tables in the bar jumped up with jubilant shouts. It seemed that no one could stay at home that night. The favorite was packed. Amanda could barely keep up with taking orders and running from the bar to the customers. At the peak of the noise and clamor, the door of the bar opened and a new, unfamiliar to the old-timers company poured in from the cold. The young, athletic-looking guys piled into the center of the bar, where a few bar stools were still empty. Amanda breathed a sigh of relief that at least their agile bartender could handle these guys on his own, and fixed a strand of her blonde hair out of the ponytail that was secured on the top of her head with a colored knitted elastic band. Eve appeared from the back room and whispered trustingly, "If I make it through tonight until the favorite closes, consider me an Olympic gold medalist too. I'm exhausted." The old cleaning lady winked at her conspiratorially. "And look at the newcomers, they don't look like neighborhood natives at all. One is more beautiful than the other. I remembered a phrase from my favorite film, 'Where did such a handsome man come from?'" Eva laughed and Amanda turned round to look at the handsome strangers. Her attention was immediately drawn to one of the sturdy, trim guys. He was slowly sipping beer from a tall glass with a colorful emblem on the side and watching the action on the big TV screen. Even from a distance, it was obvious that he had dark brown eyes, almost like two glowing coals, and a short cut of dark, almost black hair. Good, Amanda thought to herself. I've forgotten when I ever paid attention to the male gender, and I'm only turning 21 in a couple of months. With my studies and my daily waitressing job at Sebastian's, I'm going to turn into an old maid or a blue stocking without a single sign of femininity so soon. As if overhearing her thoughts, the guy suddenly turned round and looked straight at her. Without averting his gaze for a few seconds, he smiled warmly, and only then replied to the guy sitting next to him. Since the car stalled, they took it to a service station. God told us to watch the Olympic opening ceremony here. "Okay, Kevin, whatever you say," he replied. "At least I got some warmth while we waited for the tow truck. I was freezing to death." They talked some more quietly, and then ordered more beer. The evening was drawing to a close, and Amanda's shift was coming to an end. It hadn't been easy, but the opening of the Athens Olympics had been worth it. Everyone was in high spirits. Amanda had forgotten all about the guy who had caught her eye for a while, but somewhere in the heavens, fate had decided otherwise. When the Athens Olympic skiing competition fell on the schedule, he showed up at their bar, the favorite, but this time alone, without his mates, taking the far table in the corner. Gesturing for her to come over, he ordered a mug of non-alcoholic beer and a plate of peanuts, croutons, and squid rings. He kept his eyes on the screen while the skiing competition was on, and as he left, he suddenly asked Amanda a question. "What time do you get off work, Amanda?" Her name was on her jacket. "I'd like to walk you out, if you don't mind." "I don't mind." The waitress, who was already quite tired at the end of the day, looked embarrassed. Now she didn't care whether she had a decent appearance for socializing with a handsome man. She was surprised that the man she had turned her feminine attention to was the one who had returned to the favorite bar. "Your shift will be over in 40 minutes, Amanda said. "I'll be waiting for you in the car out front. Take it easy and get your work done. I'm in no hurry." They drove the 2 blocks to her house in a minute. The streets were deserted at night. Only rare streetlights and the moon in the sky slightly illuminated the even rows of brick 5-story buildings and the bench at the entrance. They were silent, as if they had water in their mouths. The guy only said deftly when he opened the car door for her, "I didn't get a chance to introduce myself. I'm Kevin. I'm a ski coach." I'm supposed to be in Athens right now if it weren't for the Olympics. I'm still watching my favorite events on TV. My charges are small, their victories are still ahead of them. We reached the flat, where Kevin had volunteered to escort her, in complete silence, like gorillas in the forest before an important mission. I'm not asking for coffee, the man said, although I would like a cup of this invigorating drink. Why not? Amanda agreed easily, having had enough of the loneliness of returning to the warmth of home after work, with only the old refrigerator humming quietly at its epicenter. And then an equally ancient television switched on for company, and no one has been home for months. They entered the flat at the same time, bodies colliding on the threshold. Amanda had read in some novel before that there was such passion when sparks flew between a man and a woman. Now she saw the process in real life, and she even felt like she was electrocuted at the touch. Amanda, let's switch to you, she heard Kevin's voice through the cotton wool in her ears and nodded in response. Is that a Chinese god? Kevin asked, pointing to a statue of some Asian goddess Joyce had given him a long time ago, and it was on the dresser. I'm going to put the kettle on in the kitchen, he said. I'm sorry, I'm just doing the housework. You're not looking so good. You're so tired after all that running around in the bar. 5 minutes later, 2 large cups of instant coffee were on the kitchen table. Nearby, fresh loaf and cheese sandwiches were calling for a snack. Amanda had just run to the shop for groceries before work. Kevin acted as if he'd been cooking dinner for the two of them for years, routine and familiar. After the meal, he quickly washed the cups over the kitchen sink and set them in the metal drying rack. He began to say goodbye. Checked out the furnishings in your house. Until the Olympics are over, I'll meet you from work every day, and then we'll see. He was a quiet man and a very reliable husband, her Kevin. She had never known before what it was like to be behind an impenetrable stone wall. They got close after meeting each other lightning fast, without a long courtship, without a candy bouquet period of special romance. He became her first and only man. And so he remained so to this day. A year after they met, Terence was born, a curly-haired, Kevin like Terence, and 3 years later a fidgety and bully Molly. He and Kevin had already decided that with their common passion for alpine skiing they would stop for now. Marcus, however, as their thoughts had not been heeded, came crashing down like a snowball 3 years after Molly was born. What a terrible moment, Amanda often said after her husband's death. How can it be? Just yesterday a man was hugging you, whispering tender words in your ear, living side by side. Today he is gone. Back then, at the beginning of their married life, and later in between having children, Kevin and Amanda spent all their free time in the mountains waiting for the first snow, or seeing it off at the end of the season. Amanda has long since graduated from a pedagogical institute, but she never had the chance to teach school children the rules of spelling and love of literature. At the Olympic Reserve School, where her husband worked, there was a vacancy for a tutor for a younger group of hopeful kids who had come to their town from all over the country. Kevin's parents were medical epidemiologists. They went for the long dollar, hooked on the natives with all their caring hearts. Amanda sometimes joked that their eldest son, Terence, was curly-haired only because Kevin had flown to a distant continent to see his parents and caught a local virus. Molly was just like her mother Amanda, blonde, gray-eyed with an outwardly calm and peaceful disposition. A misleading impression. In fact, she was a collector of pranks, a lover of sharp situations and adventures. The youngest Molly started skiing like a stumbling block. People around her joked. That girl was already born with ski boots and poles in her hands. Amanda stroked the ski equipment on the mezzanine. Her eyes stung with tears again. How ornate everything had turned out then, a year ago. Marcus was born. She was back on maternity leave with him. There was a surprise, a big one, as Kevin laughed. They were walking with the pram in the park near the newsagents. Terence and Molly lingered. They liked the plastic toys in the window. The chatty saleswoman even stretched her head out of the window, admiring their friendly family. And then she went somewhere in the inner pockets and pulled out a slightly tattered lottery ticket. Young people, I've got a ticket here from the instant lottery. Just rub the strip and you'll see whether you've won or not. It's worth $100. Will you try your luck? Kevin and Amanda laughed. We don't believe in any of these lotteries. We'll buy a ticket from you. We'll bore you under the counter for a day to help you out. And these winnings are only shown in TV adverts to fool naive ordinary people. We don't believe in such freebies. While they chatted with the newspaper and magazine saleswoman, Terrence and Molly picked out a plastic toy each, both of them very pleased with their purchase. Noisily, they rushed forwards down Park Lane. Kevin told Marcus that he couldn't choose his present yet, it was an adult lottery. "Let's wipe off the strip right here," Kevin suggested. Amanda picked up the top layer of paper with the edge of her fingernail. Faded blue numbers began to appear underneath. When she read what appeared on the piece of paper, she grinned and said only one word: "Jokers." "Ari, what's so funny about that?" Kevin reacted instantly. "We won $100 million. A million doesn't smell like a million, but a number with 6 O's looks extremely strange too," Amanda answered him. Terrence and Molly had already returned to the kiosk, having run up and down the alley. The curious owner of the paper treasure peered out of the window. "Have you got a cash win? Up to $100? I can give it to you right here on the spot." "Yes, the number 100 is also on it," replied the bewildered Amanda. "Only it's not just dollars, it's millions." "Fuck you," the aunt said in surprise. "I immediately thought that I should have erased the stripe on this seemingly expensive piece of paper with frayed edges. If the winnings are large, you'll have to go to the head office." In my memory, the largest sum of $25,000 was wiped off a ticket by a man. He came to me later and told me that he had been paid off. Excited by the unexpected situation, Kevin and Amanda, picking up the pram with Marcus and the older children, went home. There they took another look at the inscription on the ticket under a magnifying glass. There was no doubt about the numbers. A week later, the alpine ski enthusiasts convened a house council in Philadelphia. Amanda was appointed to preside. She had to say the last weighty word on what to spend the accidentally dropped and already safely received money. The woman thought for a while, and then she gave her verdict. "Kevin, I love you very much. I'm saddened by the longing for snow-capped mountain peaks in your eyes. You've already been to a ski resort with your students this winter season. But I remember your dream to conquer the black slopes on Elbrus. You can't go further than green and blue slopes with your students. They are all beginners." Mostly, Kevin replied. "A couple of rides on the red slopes in their spare time, and that's it. Adrenaline. You can't build a new passion with that. You've got a week off in a week. I won't be able to keep you company because of Marcus. Go to Elbrus with some of the guys who love skiing," Amanda suggested. At first, his wife's suggestion puzzled Kevin, but his favorite woman was right. After a serious injury 8 years ago, professional skiing in any kind of competitive sport was a thing of the past for him. At first, he was even thoroughly discouraged by the doctor's verdict. Later, he was found by the management of the Olympic Reserve School in his hometown with a proposal to switch to coaching. He still kept in close touch with his friends, the same fans of mountain slopes covered with a cap of fluffy snow. He worked with novice boys and girls in the training center. The pain from the effects of the injury was slowly wearing off. He dreamed of at least once riding on a real dashing track for extreme skiers. He was obsessed with black runs and high difficulty. Kevin was seen off on his trip by his family, then popped into the patisserie to buy their favorite cakes and have tea in the evening to celebrate the head of house's holiday. Kevin always gave so much time to his housemates that their joy for him was genuine. We should let the husband and dad go skiing once in a while too, Amanda considered. Then she vaguely remembered the day when she received a phone call from a ski base near Elbrus people saying something in Caucasian. They did not speak English well. 4 days after Kevin and his friends arrived at the base, a group of young rich people from the golden elite of society showed up. The young people went to the ski slopes drunk. When the instructor announced the danger of avalanches, they only laughed in his face. "We are not afraid of anything. We went to the track and will continue to go. Today we decided to try out your pro pist. We all have been skiing for years, and you are not our boss," they said to the elderly instructor guide, a Cabardinian with many years of experience, a former sportsman. "Do you even know how many people have already died near the black ski track? How many people, as reckless as you, have ended up in the permafrost, where even the corpses cannot be retrieved later? If you happen to fall to the rocky bottom?" and the weather promises to worsen, he shouted when he heard their statement. But nobody listened to the words of the experienced mountain old-timer. They passed around a flask of whiskey, patted each other on the shoulder, and piled out of the wooden log cabin into the street, Kevin told me later. He and his friends, who had already finished their coffee and khachapuri at the table, savoring the aromas of freshly baked pastries, soon got up from the table. Their plans included a short warm-up on the easy green course. They had no intention of taking any risks today. In the courtyard of the ski center, everything was quiet and peaceful. A big shaggy dog was stomping near the booth, having just finished a sugar bone which the cook from the cafe had given him. Here, far from civilization, it was not like anywhere else in the Alps. Much simpler, without the frills of tourist service. It is at the foot of the two-headed giant Elbrus. The regular guests of Kabardino-Balkaria are innumerable. And here, a little further from the village of Terskal, is a place for experienced people, for their own. In an hour after breakfast, a heavy, dense snow began to fall from the gray sky that was beginning to frown and puff up from unreasonable anger. In another hour, the sky was completely covered with inky purple clouds. The Kabardinian was muttering something quietly to himself, pursing his lips in frustration. Then he couldn't stand it any longer, put on warmer clothes, and went off in the direction of the black ski track. Having gone all the way along the paths he knew only to himself, in half an hour he stopped at the very top of the point of descent. At the side of the slope, I saw a flock of young men in bright red and yellow jackets. They were fiddling about near the same spot, moving away from it, then approaching it again. The Kabardinian swore again, smelling something wrong. His fears were not in vain. When he reached the woeful skiers, they began to explain to him that they were engaged in an improvised contest. We were descending in a line one after another when three guys who were traveling in front of us fell through the snow like through the ground, they said. They were just gone. I told you. I warned you not to go on the black track. Even if you are drunk and in bad weather, the Kabardinian replied irritably. There are treacherous crevasses everywhere. I'll go and call the guys who ski on the green. Maybe they will help me with something, and I'll call the rescuers at the control and rescue post. They searched for the wayward trio until dark. All the next day, despite the constant threat of avalanche, to no avail. Then the rescuers canceled the expedition and told all the tourists who had found shelter at a remote ski base to descend to the foot of Mount Elbrus. It would be safer there if the acceleration of the snow mass developed at an extreme speed. Kevin couldn't find a place to stay, and then he decided to stay with the Kabardan guard. Both Jenny, the cook, and himself upstairs blamed themselves for not listening to the rich kids talking, for not stopping them when they were about to go to the black ski slope. Kevin was burning inside with a prickling cold. It seemed that it wasn't other people's boys who disappeared on the damn ski run, but one of his charges from the Olympic Reserve School. He couldn't find a place, rushing around the warm interior of the log cabin, grabbing his skis, his boots, his cozy warm down jacket. He had left for the mountain before dawn. No one will ever know what he was looking for, who he hoped to pull out from under the avalanche, what snow demons he was talking to. That night an avalanche came down to the foot of Elbrus. Maybe it was she who caught him with her dense snow edge, crushed him with her mass without stopping, rushing down, pinned him to the slope, and then ran further, breaking everything on her way. What dark force had dragged him upwards, onto the black track? The old Kabardian was never able to explain to Amanda, who came to collect her husband's body. Kevin was found 3 hours after dawn. Jenny, the cook, was too shy to look in his room and wake him for breakfast. The bed in the room was already cold. Kevin was lying in a fetal position with his arms and legs oddly crossed and tucked up against his stomach near the supposed edges of the cleft. The medical examiner, after the autopsy, wrote a report that his heart had stopped. Amanda, after reading this document, immediately recalled the words of Friedrich Nietzsche. If you stare at the abyss for a long time, the abyss also stares at you. It seemed to her all the time afterwards that the last hours of Kevin's life had been terrible. Just like that, he had magically appeared in her life unobtrusively, without further words or explanations, abruptly and quickly. He'd also left her life without saying goodbye, without explaining anything, without a final look in her eyes. You're not very good at cleaning the mezzanine, Mother Amanda said to herself. Time to feed the children and put them to bed. Marcus wasn't cranky today, thankfully. Kevin and Amanda's youngest son was about to turn 2. She'd recently found an activity that fascinated him so much that he could sit quietly for hours without a peep. The secret was simple. She would place a pair of her cleanly washed trainers in front of him. She would pull the lace out of one of them and leave it in the other. They say that children at 2 years old are still very young, that they don't understand the subtleties. But Marcus was eager to put the lace into the trainer and could sit with this toy for hours on end. The most interesting thing was that, as a result of his diligence, the shoelace that had been inserted into the shoe by his hands looked much neater than the other shoelace that had not been inserted by him. Believe it or not. For the trio's dinner, Amanda fed pancakes with cottage cheese, tea with ice cream and jam. Amanda told everyone to brush their teeth before bed and head for bed. Parents, who had recently started first grade, and Molly, who was used to getting up early for kindergarten, were already accustomed to discipline. Marcus, the quiet one, only fell asleep after reading a story. Amanda had accustomed him to it herself. After that winnings almost unspent by Kevin, they lived on child allowances for the time being. The rest of the gift of fate was spent on lessons in Russian language and literature. Amanda was not a bad tutor for unhelpful pupils, but she couldn't take on many students. A good help could be the rent of Kevin's one-room flat, the renovation of which the family had long called a long construction project. All the years of living together with her husband Amanda never allowed him to sell the property. Before we know it, Terrence will be older and looking for a bride, she joked. All we need to do is freshen up your flat, change its bachelor atmosphere for a more cozy one. We'll have a family nest ready for our handsome Terrence. He's growing by leaps and bounds. Sell both my flat and Kevin's and get something newer and bigger. For some reason, Amanda wasn't feeling well either. It was a feeling she couldn't quite explain. But they had lived in an old 5-story building on the outskirts of the city for 7 years of their marriage. Once again, there was no money to continue renovating Kevin's house. The money melted away inexorably. The question of placing Marcus in an institution was again urgent. But here was the problem. The doctors said that he could not go to a kindergarten. Marcus was often ill with acute respiratory diseases and acute respiratory infections. If he could go to daycare regularly, he'd have to be 5 years old. If Kevin were here, he'd think of something. Amanda thought bitterly. In the meantime, she dutifully picked up Marcus's favorite book to reread his favorite fairy tale to her son for the 100th time. It was his all-time favorite book. Finally put the entire junior guard to bed. It was almost midnight on the clock. Amanda was disappointed to find that there was no bread or milk in the house. Even porridge for breakfast would be difficult to boil. Amanda tiptoed down the corridor, pulled on her coat and shoes, grabbed her bag and ran to the shop. It was a good thing they'd recently opened a convenience store right at the end of their house, where they always had dairy products and fresh baked goods. The golden autumn outside the window rustled the fallen leaves underfoot. The current janitors were not as diligent as Joyce. In her day, she had collected leaves into large bags reluctantly, tentatively. Burning leaves was forbidden by the sanitary control. So the bags first stood along the walls of the house, and then once a week they were taken somewhere by a rubbish truck. Now there was a string of them lined up next to the dark brickwork. Amanda thought there was a shadow moving at the epicenter. Kitty, 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 she called, just in case, as she often fed stray cats. She even promised her children that one day they would have a pet. Hey, I'm going to the shop. Can I buy you some sausages? Show your mustache and stripes. Amanda almost fainted in surprise at the sound of the ringing voice. Thank you, of course. Sausage is good when you're hungry, but I like a big, juicy wiener, even if there's no place to boil them. Who are you? A woman called out. Stranger, you'll be surprised, but I'd really like to know who I am, replied a girl of small stature with 2 braided pigtails and eyes that were clearly not those of a child. Why do you walk alone at night? It's not safe to be out here in the suburbs alone at night. I was shopping in the supermarket, the strange woman replied artlessly. I didn't manage to steal anything from the most vigilant guard. He's on shift today. Are you a thief? Amanda was once again surprised. Not the most promising of jobs, I must say. It happens very rarely, just small things. If you don't manage to earn something honestly one day. Where do you live and with whom? Amanda asked. She was shocked by the answer. Since I was found on the street, I've been living with the homeless in a house being prepared for demolition near the city station. The police know about our community, but for some reason they don't touch us. Maybe they're fine with us being there for a little while under their watch. I have amnesia. We have an old doctor there who's also homeless. She's the one who diagnosed me with it. She's the one who fixed me after I got hit on the head from behind. I don't know who attacked me. I don't remember my name or where I lived before. The girl's trusting confession touched something in Amanda's soul. She immediately asked herself a question. What would Kevin do in her place now? She knew the answer. He would try to do something to help the unfortunate victim of circumstances. Somehow, Amanda was sure that there was no lie in the words of the stranger of the night. Tell you what, let's go to the shop. I need to stock up on milk and bread, and then back to our house. I've got 3 kids. We'll make room somehow, Amanda suggested. I don't feel comfortable. You don't know me at all, she replied. Amanda immediately thought to herself. As a teacher of Russian language and literature, I can't help but notice her correct and well-spoken speech. The girl is obviously not from the marginalized or the slums. What could have brought her to the lair of the homeless? What insidious forces and people had a hand in it? In the supermarket, Amanda examined her find near the bags of fallen leaves in more detail. Poor clothes, but perfectly clean, no holes. She looked to be in her early 20s. In the darkness, the girl seemed almost childlike. The unhappy creature's look was not childish at all. It read some life experience and even a lively mind. This inquisitive gaze of green-brown eyes was not stupid. Apparently, in her past life, this girl had worn glasses. In the brightly lit hall of the supermarket, she checked the expiry dates on the labeling of milk and sour cream. She asked Amanda for clarification. Some of the dates were written in too small numbers. Then she took a long look at the labels on the bread, now wrapped in polythene with colorful pictures, baking names, and other information. Amanda was surprised again. She had chosen baked goods only on the basis of freshness, appearance, and naivety. She read something thoughtfully until she put a sliced loaf and a loaf of wholemeal bread in her basket. At the checkout, she didn't fuss and acted confidently. It didn't seem like the sort of thing that someone who was used to stealing and had never known any other way of life could behave. Where did you learn all these tricks to choose the right products? Amanda asked. I don't know. It's like something in my head. It would be better if the name told me my memory, not how to understand bread and milk, the girl replied. They entered the flat quietly. The children were sleeping peacefully. Only the night light in the hall cast faint glints of light on the walls. They call me Agnes among the homeless, because I seem to be a foundling with that name. Will you call me that too, since you've decided to invite me to visit? And don't think I'm being cheeky. Can I take a shower at your place? I've always felt uncomfortable washing in our half-barrack behind a screen fetch water from the pump around the corner, heated up on the electric cooker, for which we always get beaten up by the police. What's all this washing? Amanda brought a large terry towel from the bedroom, gave me some pajamas from her stock, showed me how to use the gas heater. There was not a shadow of doubt in her mind that Agnes would want to steal something from them, take advantage of her trust and deceive her. After her shower, she went to the kitchen, where Amanda had already made her tea with milk and a sandwich with doctor's sausage, which her children loved so much. In the light of the orange lamp, the landlady changed her mind once more. Agnes looked even older when she came out of the hot water, with her hair loose around her shoulders and a deep look in her marsh-colored eyes. Sleep came to both of them. Even though Amanda had to get up at 7 to take her son to school and her daughter to kindergarten, she was curious. She wanted to ask the girl if she remembered anything about her mysterious past. Madeline stretched out sweetly in bed like a graceful kitten. Freedom of movement, freedom of action, freedom to call and text her lover's mobile phone. There was no longer that nasty Nicole standing between them. Ugh. I had to name my daughter so intricately for that oligarch. She is Nicolette Stevenson, favorite daughter, wife of a business partner, a successful young woman. So where is she now? I'm looking for her in the field. It was a good idea of hers to get that upstart out of the way. She and her beloved from the school desk made eyes at each other. She with simple dreams, with dreams of a prince on a white horse. He's the son of a successful businessman, Harry. Who in town doesn't know this famous corporation of two long-time associates of Stevenson and the father of her sweet boy? How upset she was when Eric was sent to study in London at some economics academy. They danced so languidly and tenderly at graduation, the envy of all their classmates. Rumors were flying around the school that they were a couple. And then there's this surprise with this study abroad thing. Nicole was not wasting time with her studies at that moment either. The two avid business partners owned shopping malls, restaurants, and supermarkets around the city. Yes, they don't have London, New York, or even major cities here. It's just an average-sized town. But by local standards, the fortunes of the owners of all this wealth are enormous. That kind of big business has to go into safe hands. So Nicole, as everyone around her called her, went to university after school, graduated from the Department of Food Experts. She learned to determine the quality of sausage, cheese, chocolate, and all other products almost unmistakably by their appearance. Eric returned from London a serious, thoughtful young man. Harry was already rubbing his hands together in anticipation that he would be able to hand over the business to his rightful heir in a little while. Stevenson, Nicole's father, was older than his age. Despite the opportunity to receive any treatment in the best clinics in the world, with health and physical capabilities increasingly gave up. In every possible way joined the business to his daughter, who turned out to be a clever and wise assistant. Once, when Eric was still studying in the UK, the two men had a serious conversation. "Harry, mate, you and I have known each other for so many years. In fact, we trust each other. What would you think of my modest plans for my son and your daughter? It would make a handsome couple. We'd pool our capital for future grandchildren." "Yes, Mr. Harry, given the 17-year age difference. I never called my partner by name. I'll be glad to see our offspring work out to our mutual satisfaction. I think they'll get to know each other. They're not the first, they're not the last, they're the ones who seal the business with marital ties. I think that marriage in our commercial times is better to conclude with people of their own circle, so that then unnecessary surprises did not arise. I agree with your idea." The two men had not forgotten when Eric had returned to his hometown, encouraged by his academic success. The two families, and the men had already discussed their plans with their wives and received full approval, began to organize picnics, parties, receptions with the obligatory condition the presence of the whole family. So willy-nilly Nicole and Eric had to cross paths all the time. The young people themselves were not stupid either. Far-reaching ideas of their parents with their minds approved. Of course, they did not feel great and bright love for each other. But love is not required for a marriage of convenience. The main thing was that they sympathized with each other, did not experience obvious dislike, were not negatively disposed when communicating close. The level of intelligence and development, similar interests did the trick. To begin with, they went to lunch a couple of times in a restaurant, to a fashion exhibition and a touring performance of the Capitol's theater. A couple of months later, Eric invited Nicole to a romantic dinner, where he made her a marriage proposal, handed her a stylish ring and a dainty velvet box thick burgundy color. We drank to the possible future marital happiness. They decided on the date of the reception in honor of the official announcement of the engagement. Nicole allowed herself a couple of glasses of wine. Eric downed 200 grams of whiskey for courage, then made up his mind. "Nicole, I'm sorry to ask, but I'd like to know. Have you had experience with men before?" Nicole, not the least bit embarrassed, simply answered. "I had a 2-year student affair with a guy from a parallel group. We were in our 20s, who at that age only reads poetry and looks at the moon. I wasn't a monk in England either, having been with a student from another college for 3 years. We both knew it was a no-strings-attached affair. She's an educated, well-read person, a loyal mate. But we parted without tears or regrets. Both of us knew from the beginning that it was bound to happen at some point." After this frank conversation, it somehow happened by itself that at Nicole's flat, she had already been living separately from her parents for 2 years. Eric looked into her eyes questioningly. Nicole nodded. Both understood without words. There was a whole life ahead of them. They had to see if they were right for each other. This night for the two of them didn't become something beyond the clouds, fabulously magical. Mutual sympathy, youth, easy interest helped. Nicole had thought at the time that it could be like that. What Eric thought, no one ever knew. But he wasn't particularly disappointed either. The reception in honor of the engagement of the two heirs took place. They were both the only children in the family. The reception was organized at the highest level in the finest country restaurant. Hundreds of guests, the glitter of diamonds and emeralds on the ladies, expensive suits and watches on their bow, representatives of the press of all stripes from the city multi-circulation to the tabloids. Madeline sat in the beauty parlor and was bored. The queue for hairstyling was still not coming up. She and the girls had gathered at a cafe in the city center to impress everyone with her beauty. Over the years, Eric had become even more flamboyant. A little femme fatale. Married boring, she said. Why the verdict? Yes, the husband turned out to be a promising scientist, but such a nerd. In the shower sits with his snowflakes, all day long digging in old manuscripts. Where is it seen that in the age of the internet, a man collects information from ancient manuscripts? A doll like me should be brought out regularly, so that other men would be envious. And he kept saying, "Darling, you'll soon be proud of your new surname. On me will fall international recognition and fabulous royalties." Madeline would not last a month with this plan. But he was surprisingly handsome and very good in bed. True, on the marital bed he rarely appeared. He preferred to sit in libraries and then at a desk until midnight. Some academy had given him a personal grant for all expenses, so he was not deprived of his daily bread. He had enough to live on with his young wife. Not luxurious, but not poor either. Madeline dreamed of an endless and full-flowing stream of money, so that she could cling to it with greedy hands and lips when she wanted to drink wealth. To hold his material affirmations in her lap, her hands with long nails with a perfect manicure. She ran away from her scholarly husband as soon as she met a brash young entrepreneur at a hen party, socking away money left and right in a nightclub. Her husband had just rushed off to the library of a neighboring town. There's something interesting picked up for him, and there he stayed the night. She agreed to accompany the visiting businessman to his hotel room. The night went terribly, but she did not go home empty-handed after the meeting. Generous, inexperienced lover gave her such a sum for a couple of hours of dialogue which her husband did not give her for 6 months for expenses. Made it clear that the encounter was casual. There would be no sequel. Madeline thought hard. She needs to find the chosen one, so that as a man was not much worse than her current husband, and in the funds are not constrained and not greedy, would be happy to cherish the woman she loved. It would be better, undoubtedly, that she received the status of his lawful wife. But that would still have to be worked on thoroughly. In the pile of magazines on the nightstand in the beauty parlor, something on the cover of one of them looked painfully familiar to her. She grabbed an edition of the local yellow press and laughed out loud for the whole room. "Look, the golden carp is back from London," she whispered fervently in her friend's ear. And he had found himself some bride in the local aristocratic beau monde. All intellectual with glasses. How was it in the famous comedy? "If she gives me one, I'll take her without a hitch, but first, Maggie, I have to show my first love in front of my eyes to see what a woman with a capital letter should look like." Madeline's devious plans were not to be realized at once. Harry and Grant decided that it would be a good idea if their children went on not one trip like a honeymoon, but 2. First, they would go to the Dominican Republic with its tropical delights, dive into the turquoise Atlantic Ocean. They will walk by hand on velvet white sands, admire the local flora and fauna. At the same time, they will get used to the idea that immediately after their return, a big lavish wedding will be held in the city. The position obliges. After the marriage ceremony, the newlyweds will go to more civilized Europe for a couple of months to finally consolidate their feelings in the formed marriage union. They can manage without the heirs to the big kingdom for the time being. In Grant's office 5 years ago, a promising young specialist had appeared, and the elderly businessman had been delighted with him ever since. Grant was brilliantly educated, had received a red diploma in Washington, and was a native of their city. He refused to pursue a career in the capital for the reason that his elderly parents lived at home. They already required constant supervision. They themselves did not cope well even with household chores. A late child is the one and only. His father and mother still found the strength to help him graduate from the Lyceum, to get an education in Washington. And then they gave up. They sat in front of the TV all day long. Almost stopped going outside. Grant was recommended by Harry, an old university friend of his. "He's a rare bloke. He's a great personal assistant," he said. "Yes, we were going to leave the running of the holding company in the hands of our children," said Harry. "I have other plans. One can't interfere with the other. No one's suggesting that you make him CEO of the whole company. Let him hang around with you for a while and then we'll see." And he was right. The owners of the holding company had long trusted their deputy general director. Grant received this position from them a year ago. While the children were traveling, getting used to the new family life after the wedding, Grant was pulling all the managerial burdens and coped with them perfectly. Madeline was the only one who wasn't bored. While the newlyweds were out of town, she perfected her appearance again and again. The gossip of the world reported that Eric and Nicole's marriage had been officially registered after all. But when could such a trifling obstacle stop her? Or would this man be her husband? We'd just have to wait. The young people returned from Europe tanned and rested. Both were eager to get back to work as soon as possible. Relations between them were even reminiscent of mates. They were not in a hurry to have a child. They decided to delay this important matter. Madeline prepared the meeting with Eric as a strategic operation. She found out where the young businessman goes to lunch on weekdays, wore her most stylish outfit, knowing perfectly well that in it, and with fashionable, almost imperceptible makeup, she is irresistible. The altercation with the waitress attracted the attention of the entire catering establishment. At the moment when Eric had just sat down at one of the tables, Madeline had played the whole thing out. She gave the waitress a subtle nudge under her arm, and a cup of chocolate flew onto Madeline's snow-white suit. "What have you done?" she exclaimed. "Girl, do you know how much such a jacket from the latest collection can cost? You can't pay for it in a year with your meager salary." Eric involuntarily turned his head in the direction of the frightening lady and marveled how marvelously beautiful she was. Madeline also looked in his direction, immediately stopped bringing up the waitress, and smiled welcomingly. "Eric, are you?" she asked. A minute later, they were already sitting at the same table. Eric was amazed at the change that had taken place with his high school sweetheart. Groomed, regal, alluring, not like his quiet, always even-tempered, ordinary wife. Madeline had a fire in her that promised unearthly pleasure. "And Eric fell for me," the money hunter thought predatorily. "I've got to take this chance and squeeze him. But first, a little tease." "Oh, Eric, I'd love to meet you, but I'm in a hurry," said Madeline. "I have an appointment, and I have to go home and change. My suit is hopelessly ruined." "A little thing like that isn't worth your trouble," Madeline said. "Eric, where can I buy one just like it? Let's meet tomorrow and fix this mistake of the negligent waitress." The golden carp has taken the bait, Madeline decided in no uncertain terms. Eric was also burning with impatience, waiting for the next meeting with Madeline. In Eric's soul, conscience didn't even squeak. Grant liked Harry's daughter, and now his son's wife. He couldn't help it. No, that definition would not even be correct. Was he in love, or was it her? Nicole had long ago and hopelessly. This young woman walked past him like he was nothing. A polite hello when she met him, and immediately forgot he existed. With the gaze of a loving man, Grant noted that there was no real warmth between Nicole and Eric. Dry cultural politeness, a tribute to the idea of keeping and growing the business. That was where it ended. Once, a long time ago, before all the marital processes and even the engagement, Grant had even had the impulse to open up to Nicole, to tell her how he felt. But it was on that day that he had accidentally witnessed a conversation between Harry and Terrence's families. Harry said, "Can you imagine mate Terrence, the daughter of one of our competitors, married some penniless bloke? And the father didn't even bat an eye. Let her choose with her heart. What kind of sincere feelings can there be in our business? I think that with such views on life, a solid business will never be built." Hearing this rant, Grant immediately changed his mind about something to say to Nicole. He loved her silently to himself, not paying attention to other girls. Although with his masculine appearance, the entire female cohort of the team cast explosive glances at him. Thank God, at least his heart's secret no one guessed. There was chatter that his heart was broken by some hottie from New York. Eric and Madeline were drowning in an ocean of unearthly passion. In fact, Madeline herself did not throw herself into the maelstrom of all these sentimental tricks. She had calculated everything. Eric never came to a date without an expensive gift. Her entire flat was now littered with luxurious bouquets of flowers. There were incredibly expensive birthday outfits in her wardrobe, a small, sleek car of astronomical value, and even with technical tuning for the 8th of March, a stunningly beautiful canvas from Somalia. Eric was a generous lover, earned an excellent income, and had a personal bank account, with the contents of which his father had no interest. Let the boy have some funds for pocket money. Somehow, once again, Madeline was lazily bored. She ran through the television channels and came across an old, very old cartoon film called Last Year's Snow Falling. Its busy character kept moving through space with the phrase, "It's going to be a bit small." At that moment, Madeline acutely realized that she didn't want to remain in the role of the second woman in Eric's life. After all, her partner never stayed overnight at her place anyway, or went to Nicole's place in the next fancy hotel, and she even suspected that he never did his marital duty at home. Nicole lived in complete ignorance. Her husband at work, at corporate receptions, at city social gatherings was always there, as he should be. And how he spent his time in other hours, she did not care at all. Inside Nicole lived a certain mystery. After returning from Europe, already being the legal wife of Harry Jr., she once found herself at work in the same lift with Deputy General Manager Grant. He stood silently, without making a sound, facing his boss's daughter. He was looking at her in a way that gave her goosebumps. A thought was born in her head. I shouldn't think that. But you can't fool yourself. If only instead of Eric, my husband had been this charismatic, charming, very intelligent, and very polite man. Why did fate decide that I should continue the dynasty in my father's business? One must follow the call of one's heart. On the top floor, Nicole stepped out of the lift and headed for her office, dispelling the obsession on the way, the magic of Grant so suddenly captivating her. She'd liked the young man from the first moment she'd met him. But she remembered her father's favorite motto: "The position obliges." She pulled herself together and ordered, "Don't you dare even think of him. Your fate is the fate of the girl in the novel. But I'm given to another, and I'll be faithful to him forever. So pull yourself together and work." Nicole hadn't forgotten that meeting in the lift. She pulled those memories out of the recesses of her mind when she was alone. Her father had been shifting more and more business tasks onto her shoulders. She and Grant were always crossing paths at meetings, but they sat far apart. Nicole didn't even notice that her husband Eric's schedule was increasingly filled with overnight trips to branch offices. Their cold marriage of convenience did not bring them both simple human happiness. Nicole couldn't even remember the last time she and her husband had been close. At that time, Madeline was preparing to give Eric an ultimatum, either her or that nasty Nicole. Eric was disappearing more and more often with his mistress, sometimes for the whole weekend. She decided that the next few days, coinciding with the annual holiday, would be a good time to talk. Eric had promised that they would fly to Miami for all 3 days under the guise of a business meeting with Southern partners. The trip to Miami was extremely romantic. There was only one thing that frustrated Eric. Madeline did not want to spend time in bed. He was drawn to a Cuban restaurant or a trendy new chain cafe where the seafood was amazing. Even lavish shopping at the local mall hadn't made her more amenable. The man was puzzled by this behavior of hers, reeking of either chill or indifference. By nightfall, after a lavish dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the resort, Madeline hardly showed up and got into bed with him side by side, but she wouldn't let him near her. She started a conversation. "Eric, don't you think it's time for us to make up our minds about our relationship? I'm not going to spend the rest of my life as your second lover." "Girl, you know what our marriage to Nicole is based on. Divorce is impossible. We're the management center of a huge holding company. If it doesn't hold together, it's going to crack. There'll be no more opportunities to spoil you like this." "But what about me?" Eric asked angrily, not expecting such a blatant refusal at once. "The eternal number 2 in the shadow of your Nicole. That's not going to happen." That night, for the first time, Eric was never allowed to see the body. He flew home angry. Madeline, sitting next to him, kept her mask of hurt and offense on her face. They both took separate taxis home. A week after that ill-fated trip to Miami, Madeline had a new plan in her head. If Nicole couldn't be moved, she had to be wiped off the face of the earth. She did not even care about the fact that such a plan smells of crime. Madeline was still in a furious rage. Eric decided to take time out and give his precious mistress time to calm down and accept his arguments wisely. That's why it didn't even occur to him to be suspicious when his wife disappeared without returning from work one evening. Upon learning that Nicole, whom he loved devotedly, had disappeared, Grant was at a loss for words and decided to conduct his own investigation. It had long seemed to him that Eric had been acting extremely strange in recent months. Telling his father and his partner that he would be late in the office with the documents that had accumulated like a snowball, and then mysteriously disappearing as soon as the two partners went home. Unable to resist, he decides to play a homegrown private investigator. To follow Eric, who once outside the walls of the holding company, was not really hiding. Grant learned about the fact that he had a mistress after a couple of days. Moreover, following the heir to the family turned into an obsession for Grant. He recorded the facts of Eric's adultery with pedantry and meticulousness, expensive spending on gifts, trips to restaurants, trips to country clubs, dates in secluded hotels. He was eager to build up a collection of pictures, and he'd taken plenty of shots of Eric and Madeline from different angles, and get all that dirt in front of their families. The only thing stopping him was that he didn't know the terms of the marriage. What was disconcerting was that Nicole remained completely unperturbed. Meeting her alone in the lift, he tried to understand her inner state. He even scolded himself later for keeping an eye on her, trying to see through her like an X-ray. She was absolutely as calm as usual. She did not resemble a woman suffering from her husband's treacherous betrayal. The last straw in Grant's patience with Eric's low behavior was Nicole's disappearance. Everyone in the office had seen the young woman take her bag in the evening and hurry to the exit to the car park, get into her car and drive away. Nicole didn't show up at home that day. Eric didn't sound the alarm until the next day. He had gone out with Madeline the night his wife disappeared. Mistress again turned into a wax pussycat, faithfully looked into her eyes and said that she understood everything and agreed to everything, as long as the beloved was near. The day after the mysterious disappearance of her daughter, Joyce was no laughing matter. She was madly in love with Nicole, though she tried not to show it to anyone. The entire security team of the holding company had been alerted, and the police had joined in. Harry had enlisted the help of some private investigators he knew. To no avail. All the city and regional hospitals and morgues had already been checked. Joyce's men with Nicole's picture had looked at all the unidentified female corpses. A week later, Nicole's car was found near a park on a short walk with her bag lying orphaned in the back seat. To everyone's surprise, no barbarity had been committed to the property. Harry was going crazy, and Grant was tossing and turning between his duty to the chief and his inner doubts, all the while asking himself, how am I going to show Joyce a picture of her son-in-law with his mistress? It would lead to a quarrel between long-standing business partners, a split of a huge company, a misunderstanding between two businessmen in whose hands many of the city's commercial arteries were connected. Still, Grant made up his mind. He came to the boss's office on woozy legs, not because he realized. He was likely to lose his place in the holding company. He didn't care as long as Nicole was found. As long as she was alive and well. He knocked firmly on the door. He saw at once that Joyce had lost a great deal of color in the last few days, the Earth's fifth complexion, the fallen, unhappy eyes. What do you want, Grant? I haven't much time for work at the moment, she said. I think you ought to see this, Mistress Joyce, Grant said. He fanning the table with all the pictures he'd taken of Eric's movements. The businesswoman took the dirt on her son-in-law in her hands and went through the photos one by one, becoming more gloomy than ever. I have a feeling that Nicole's disappearance has something to do with this woman, Grant added. Why were you guys doing all this snooping? Digging up your bosses, wanting to dig up something exclusive and ruin our reputation? I love your daughter, Mrs. Joyce. I wasn't digging and digging. I just want her to be happy. Eric's behavior had been suspicious to me for some time, so I rushed to find out what's going on. Can you fire me now? Why didn't you come to me earlier with all this nastiness? Nicole seemed very serene to me. I didn't see fit to disturb her peace. Joyce glared at Grant once more, then pressed the secretary's call button. "Send the head of security to me and tell Mr. Harry I'd like to see him in my office." Grant was taken aback. In the past, the younger Joyce had always gone to the partner herself when she had questions. Yes, and all corporate meetings were always held in the boardroom next to Harry's office. "You're free to go, Grant. I'll let you know how I feel about your outside initiatives," Joyce said. The conversation between the two oldest partners was heavy. But first Joyce showed Harry all the photos Grant had taken. Without saying where she had got the material from, she asked directly, "Did you know your son was having an affair with his mistress?" "No, I didn't know that," Harry replied. "If I had known, I would have tried to stop it." The head of security knocked on the door. The men concentrated on working out a plan to find Nicole due to the newly discovered circumstances. Madeline was nonchalantly drinking coffee and chatting with a friend on the phone when someone knocked on her flat door. She stretched sweetly, pulled up the hem of her silk dressing gown and asked coquettishly, "Honey, is this your idea of a joke? You have a key, don't you?" "Open up, Madeline. Eric sent us to see you," came the reply. The woman opened the door immediately. Two big guys, either from the military or from the sporting world, poured into the flat. "Where's Nicole?" One of them asked sharply. "We warn you that the next person who knocks on your door will be the police." Madeline flapped her eyelashes indignantly. "I don't know who Nicole is. There must be some mistake." The second of the uninvited guests dumped photos on the coffee table in front of her. "We'll still prove that you had something to do with her disappearance. And then you'll be facing a much more serious criminal offense than you are now." In a moment, the beautiful Madeline, hiding her face in horror, turned into a pitiful semblance of a femme fatale. She hurried off in a confused hurry. "I only asked the boys at the bar to scare her. And those idiots overdid it, hit her on the head from behind with something heavy. When I gave them the money for the work, they said they were confused, took her under their arms to the waiting room at the railway station and sat her on a free chair. She didn't lose consciousness after the injury, but she became lethargic and strange. They thought it would be a good thing and tried to disappear as quickly as possible." The bloke showed her the phone they'd recorded the conversation and her confession on. "You'd better go to the police yourself, as a customer. If Nicole's father takes you in, things will be much worse," they said firmly. Further searches became easier. The security service of the holding company turned the whole station upside down and came to the lair of the bums. When they saw Agnes's photo, they told everything they knew without refusal. Yeah, they found one at the station, dragged her in. Rose's doctor nursed her back to health, treated her as best she could. Only she never remembered who she was. Then they all taught the new girl a trade, how not to disappear in the big city. Clothes were taken. Expensive ones were lost and sold at the clothing market. Watches and jewelry went there too. Agnes didn't have her phone with her. Apparently the people who hit her on the head took the expensive toy. A few days ago, she didn't return from a night out in the field where she used to work part-time. So, she was picking weighed fruit and vegetables in the back of supermarkets. It's a temp job. If you look decent, they can trust you. The entire security service of the holding company went to all the places where homeless people sometimes try to earn a little bit of honest money. In 2 places, Nicole was immediately recognized, and in one shop, the checkout lady said, "I know this girl. She's always so polite and cultured. She often buys groceries from us. Sometimes she comes alone, sometimes with an older woman or with her younger brothers and sisters." The servicemen were surprised. "Maybe it's not our Nicole. They all live in that 5-story building, but we can't name the flat." "You can ask the grandmothers in the courtyard," the cashier told them. Amanda couldn't be happy that one dark autumn night she met Agnes in the courtyard. She was a golden assistant, clearly well-educated and well-read. She found an excellent rapport with the children, who listened to all her stories with their mouths open. Marcus was hugging Agnes by the side of her leg and would not let her go. Amanda could now safely leave the house to study with the students. The school year was gaining momentum, and many students were lagging behind in Russian language and literature. there was no shortage of clients. Amanda went to the supermarket to buy some cakes. They would have a sweet party tonight with Agnes and the children to watch some interesting film. The cashier at the exit looked at her strangely, as if she wanted to say something, but then remained silent. Amanda thought, "My mascara must have smeared when I rubbed my eye with my fist. Well, the house is just around the corner. And there's a mirror." The drive to their entrance was blocked by a cortege of expensive cars. All elite foreign cars, big with shiny pearlescent sides. Men in strict suits, white shirts, and ties stood near the cars. One of them was obviously very nervous. Grant was asking to ride with security to where Nicole was presumably now, so pitifully that the stern businessman McDowell's heart trembled. "Go ahead. But to me they're without any tricks," he said. It had recently occurred to Harry that they had been wrong to strategize a marriage of convenience between the children of two high-ranking families. Eric, after his affair with Madeline had been discovered, had rushed to follow new trails, and lingered under the police station where his mistress was in custody. Grant, on the other hand, wouldn't go home until security brought new tidings to the chief in the evenings about how the search for Nicole was progressing. You can't command the heart to love. It's not subject to human will, he thought. Amanda walked up to her flat as if through a line, but stopped when she heard her neighbor Chloe's voice. "Oh, there she is herself. Is it in her house now, the girl you're looking for? Is that who all those expensive Jeeps with tinted windows are after? I knew Agnes was a tricky girl. What an entourage." She turned to the men. "I'll take one of you with me. You're going to scare the children with this team? Shall I go?" The handsome man, who seemed to be the most nervous, stepped forward. The head of security grinned. "Well, go on, Mr. Deputy General Manager. Maybe you'll be of more use." Agnes opened the door and saw a strange man behind Amanda. He rushed towards her, grabbed her in his arms. "Oh my God, Nicole, are you alive? It's so good to see you. We all went crazy when you disappeared." A click in my head, a brief flash, a silver lift with a stylish design. Two people entered the office, a man and a woman. And the woman felt so good to have this man around. That's what Grandma Rose used to say back at the homeless shelter. "Your memory is like lightning flying. It will come back, baby. You just need strong emotions and it will serve you well again." Away with doubt. Nicole remembered who she was, how she'd parked her car outside a kiosk to buy a bottle of cool mineral water, how someone had approached quietly from behind, as if sneaking around, and then pain and failure. Nicole stepped towards Grant and put her arms around his strong, powerful shoulders. "It's good to see you too, Grant. It's really good to see you." Since the mysterious story of Nicole's disappearance, there have been abrupt changes in the city's richest holding company. Mr. Harry, who had been very hard hit by recent events, had completely handed over the reins of the company to his partner, Mr. McDowell. He even sold his shareholding to him. They say it's undervalued, as compensation for moral hazard. The rich don't get it. Harry's son, Eric, lives in a town near the penal colony, where his mistress Madeline is serving time. He started drinking. Recently, he was even seen in the company of two local celebrity alcoholics, Henry and Alex. Madeline herself does not react to the exploits of her lover. She is having an affair with one of the zone workers. Why does she need Eric? Now it is necessary to look for a more favorable option for themselves. McDowell did his best for his daughter. Madeline's going to be in the penitentiary for another 6 years. Her lawyer hinted she might not even be eligible for parole. Grant and Nicole were recently married, but on a wedding trip abroad refused to go. They went to conquer Karelia with its beauty. No luxury hotels. A tent, a fire, soup in a kettle, tea with berries, a really favorite person next to them. That's happiness. Mr. McDowell has taken up charity work. His first brainchild was a school for talented children from disadvantaged families. The director of the school, a teacher of Russian and literature, Amanda. Her youngest son, Marcus, learned to read early. He spends hours in the library at his mom's work. Recently, Amanda took a Maupassant book away from him and said, "That's not for you to read yet, my young lover of good literature." Amanda herself has not yet found a man to her liking. There is no equal to Kevin, so it's better to be alone than with anyone. Each of them learnt their lessons from the fact that fate once pushed them into this world. They each drew their own conclusions from what had happened. Life is a mixed bag.